This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My guest today, Ed Calderon. Ed worked as a law enforcement officer in Mexico, combating the cartels, organized crime, counter-narcotics. He has a very unique voice and perspective on the U.S.-Mexico relationship. You can find him at edsmanifesto.com. And now, without further ado, Ed Calderon. Well, let's kick it off because I'm going to be respectful of your time because I know you have 1,000 things going on all the time in such high demand, and I really appreciate you taking time to sit down today. Because I wish it was in person. I really wish it was in person. I've been meaning to get in one of your courses for years, and since I think you did one with a friend of mine out in Texas, Jeff Houston, in Dallas years ago, and maybe you do them every year. I forget, but he was telling me about how amazing it was, and I think he might be the one that introduced me to you, maybe like 2015, 16 time frame, 17 time, like around there.
I remember you were promoting your first book.
Okay, that's when you
and somebody sent me one, and I was like, oh shit, this is cool.
Oh,
you
man.
know because of the
oh yeah,
I'm a dork, and as far as this whole tradecraft stuff and how seeing some of that kind of play out. I carried a Winkler Tomahawk for work.
Did you?
Before they were online.
No way. How did you find out about them?
I did 2 training cycles in Coronado with members of NCIS and some NSW guys.
Okay.
Man. And when I saw those things on, I'm like, what are those for?
Yeah.
Oh. And I had to get one, so they hooked me up with a contact with Winkler, and I carried around one for a bit in Mexico.
No way. That is wild, man. Well, in that first book, then I had a little kind of cartel hit scene down in Tijuana. And but we had, being in Coronado, California, a lot of people from Mexico, Tijuana specifically, have homes also in Coronado. Right
in
there.
In the Keys.
Yeah.
In the Keys.
A lot of people in telecommunications. Maybe.
And cartel members. There's a bunch of cartel members that live in the Keys, and
that's
we used to,
kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, we used to say like, "Hey, dudes, like when we go out trading there, you do know that there's like, just before you get to your gate to go into the amphibious space, there's a bunch of the guys you're probably going to go after if you ever go to war with Mexico, right next door. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Oh man, as well. So some of those people that I knew that had connections to Mexico, to Tijuana specifically, I asked them about that chapter where my character goes down to Mexico, Tijuana, and I was asking about neighborhoods and what it would look like. Where would you want to go? Where would you not want to? I was just asking all these questions and a sponge, and so I tried to weave all that into the novel and not just make it up, but actually talk to people who had touch points down there. I wish I'd known you at the time. I would have totally reached out for sure.
You did great. You did great. There's always a cringe factor when you see people write about something that they're probably not exposed to or really don't do the research well. And it's been like kind of refreshing to see that, and also the series now. It's like,
thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool
to
see some of that on there.
Man, I appreciate that. And did you grow up down there? Was Tijuana? Were you born in Tijuana?
Yeah, born and raised in Tijuana, Mexico. If you don't have English there, you're pretty much dead. As far as work goes, I was put through a language program as part of my training, so that's how I got my clear English accent. Yeah. I think you guys in the U.S. have something similar where they try and get rid of the accent when you speak Spanish in some weird programs out there. So I think they tried to replicate that in reverse.
Okay.
With people like me.
No kidding. So did you come up to the United States as a kid and go back? You were always in Tijuana? Because so many people go down there. So
no. I grew up in Baja. Never lived in the U.S. for longer than 2 days. Or some of the training stuff that I did up there.
But as a kid, you wouldn't come across to do anything.
go across to buy stuff at Suncoast,
Okay.
buy movies at Suncoast, which was basically that, and then resell them down in Mexico. That was my hustle when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
Skateboarding, but that the concerts, but that's about it. I
Okay.
never lived in the U.S., so
Gotcha.
I've been up here for 5 years now, and it's people hear my English and assume that I've been up here for a long time, and I just had my first s'more a year ago.
There you go.
It's like I'm new here. I'm still
Hey,
learning.
there you go. Now you're all in. You got to have a s'more. That's fantastic. So growing up down there, were there pressures to take a different path throughout your life down there? What was life like growing up as a kid down there?
I mean, so I'm from 1982, so I got to see a cool Tijuana. I mean, there was always something shady going on. Tijuana being at it as it is. I remember getting a kick out of seeing it, Tijuana depicted on The Simpsons, for example. Uh, so there was always like this thing about Tijuana where the outside world would only know about the nightlife in Tijuana.
Hmm.
But if you're from Tijuana, you have access to basically the best of Mexico. What I mean by this, all of the Mexicans that couldn't get across the border will stay in Tijuana, in places like Tijuana. So the street food is transdimensional. The multiculturalism and the American culture mixed into everything is also pretty phenomenal to kind of grow up in. I mean, we didn't have a lot of things that we would lack in Tijuana because we're not right next door to California. So that was pretty cool to kind of grow up in. The music was amazing. I got to see Sublime when I was a kid
Nice.
at a skate park in Rosarito. Um, Rage Against the Machine, Red Hot Chili Peppers would play in Tijuana because it's Tijuana, so you have to play here. So
Okay.
I got that type of childhood, pretty amazing, legit amazing.
Nice.
Somewhere in the late '90s into the early 2000s, that's when the war started. I mean, cartels had already have had a presence in the area, but the whole violence in the street aspect of it, and your friends going missing, and the danger being really close, and kind of this normalization of the fact that you go to school in high school and four of your friends just don't go to school and they nobody knows where they are and they're male and they're military aged and it seems like they went to work for some of these groups and now they're gone. That started happening when I was in high school. Um, Slowly but surely, kind of this creeping thing started getting into society. Your friends started carrying. Some of them started carrying guns. The cops wouldn't stop certain people anymore. Um, and there was like it was known, certain people own Tijuana, and it's not the police and it's not the government. It was the Ariana Felix cartel back then, and later on, it was not clear exactly who was in control because they were all fighting for the largest drug route on the planet, the richest one, which is the one that goes right into San Diego.
Man, so right around that time, I think is late 90s, maybe even 2000, but right around that time is when the military said no more service members going down to Tijuana because every weekend and some weeknights, you have Camp Pendleton, obviously the huge Navy base in San Diego, and people
Yeah,
would just head down, park in that parking lot right on the border, and then walk across to Tijuana, have that night, and then stumble back in the morning back to work. And that was kind of like a normal thing for people in the Navy and in the Marines in San Diego area in the 70s and 80s and into the
yeah,
into the 90s. But then it stopped in the late 90s. So right about it kind of corresponds to
yeah.
that time when you say things really picked up there. What led to that? What led to that change in the late 90s, early 2000s?
There was this peace among cartels in a lot the big parts of Mexico, and some of that peace was broken. Factions of the Sinaloa cartel and the Sinaloa cartel, if you look at it historically, it's basically a federation of smaller cartels. One of the factions of that cartel basically got into some issues with the Ariana Fiat cartel, which led into a blood war, basically. A bunch of assassination attempts on El Chapo Guzman. One of them led to the murder of a high-ranking cardinal in Mexico at an airport, who supposedly was mistaken for El Chapo Guzman by some of these hitmen. But basically, what happened is that this historically controlled area by one family, one cartel, the Arellano Fields cartel, started getting attacked and fragmented. And just like you see in other criminal enterprises and even terrorist networks out there in the world, you cut one head and it turns into several. What happened in Tijuana was that there was an attempt by certain factions of the Sinaloa cartel to take it over. And this has led to an ongoing war that we're still seeing right now, with factions trying to hold control over the border wall and specifically sales in Tijuana. So if people want to consider this, a lot of Americans living in San Diego will come down to Tijuana to buy their drugs. Mm. It's cheaper and it's not safer, but it's cheaper. Okay. So basically meaning Tijuana is a giant drug expendiary for San Diego, California specifically. You know, this is one of the largest markets on the planet. Also, it's a giant border fence that is very secure. At least if you're handicapped, you can't jump that wall. But during my time active of 12 years, I think we found somewhere around 10 large drug tunnels. Somewhere along those lines, and there's still many more of them active out there. So imagine you have access to basically a freeway across the border. The amount of money you can make with one of those is astronomical. And I think that specific control of this area, of this specific area, is what you're seeing as far as the phenomenon, what's being fought over.
Yeah.
Historically, there was one cartel, and now the part of my career, I started off in 2004 when it really kicked off. Then you add into it a corrupt government trying to figure things out. So you would go into a certain part of the town, and the municipal police was on the side of one cartel, mm-hmm. and the state police was on the side of the other. And the federales were on the side of another one, maybe, yeah. So it's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm.
Man, when you talk about cutting off the head of the snake, something else we found, I don't know if you saw this where you worked, but sometimes when you do that and you get that head of the snake, the people below learn and then become even stronger because of what they learned from that person. And maybe they were waiting for that person to either step aside or be killed in order to rise up. And now that organization as a whole can become stronger. Sometimes it can fragment, but sometimes it can also become stronger. And so that natural selection by taking out that leader, we found sometimes made the organization even stronger because they learned from that. And they adapted. And now we have to now learn and adapt again and figure that out. So we came up with this thing. I shouldn't say we, people came up with this thing in the intelligence services called cross-cut targeting, where they'd start to take out the middle of an organization. So cutting off that between the lower level and the top level to gut it, essentially, to see it wither on the vine. But did you see that ever taking out the leadership in any organization getting stronger because of that?
I mean, Americans were the number one group of people that were guilty of cutting up the head of the snake, because a lot of the stuff that happens in Mexico in one way, shape, or form is influenced and or pushed by U.S. interest and basically foreign policy. Mm-hmm. So El Chapo Guzman is an example of this. You caught El Chapo Guzman and you had him on the same tier as Osama bin Laden as far as a threat. Basically, realistically, El Chapo Guzman was not even number 2, number 3 in the scheme of things. But you take him out, and now his 3 sons are. So now it's from 1. Now you see 3, and the 3 sons are not El Chapo Guzman as far as his life experience goes. They were more flashy, more prone to violence. Different. It's just a different animal. Then if you go into a macro level, you see the Sinaloa cartel versus the New Generation cartel that is now operating. In the past, you had people who were about the life, who were more prone to act like the Chicago mob or the New York mob of the time, where they don't shit where they eat. Pardon my French. They keep things on the down low in the area. You know, they work, but outside of it, you know, they keep people happy. They don't mess with locals, that type of stuff. The U.S. and Mexico killed all those people mostly or arrested them.
Mm.
And now the ones that are left are the ultra militaristic individuals who are acting more so like an occupying force of the territories that they inhabit instead of the old timey mob
Oh,
situation.
wow.
New Generation Cartel, for example, if you've seen some of their videos and some of the stuff they do, I mean, these guys are setting up terrorist training camps of like this types you would see for that were portrayed
Hmm.
for Al Qaeda
Hmm.
back in the. So these guys are being trained up in the hills by former U.S. military members,
Oh, really?
according to some people. Yes,
Ooh,
former
I gotta
U.S.
take some notes for
military.
a future book here.
There's training camps around Michoacan and Jalisco, supposedly, and there's a lot of reports of this, where former members of the U.S. military have been training some of these. There's no other way of calling them guerrilla forces.
Hmm.
That's what they are. They're not the typical cartel small groups that will go and do stuff. These are legit occupying and guerrilla forces. There's also cross pollination of South American Colombian SF and some of the Caibil groups coming out of South America. They're also cross trading with some of these people.
What's Kabil?
And Caibil is a special forces unit from Central America,
Okay.
very known for massacring a few hundred, maybe thousand people in the wars that they were a part of. And now you're actually seeing some IRA influenced explosive artisanal devices be showing up in many parts of Mexico, including some IEDs and some homemade mortar systems.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that drones are seeing an amazing technological leaps and bounds here. Before even the Ukrainian war happened, they were using them in places like Michoacan to drop 40 millimeter grenades and or mining explosives combined with chemicals you use for pesticides. These were being dropped on cartel positions by some of these new generation cartel forces.
Wow.
Um, so the talk of what happens when you cut the head off.
Yeah.
Um, when you cut the head, so it's basically what monster are you going to is going to replace this monster?
Mm.
And what we've been seeing now is that the lessons, as you say, that they learned. The flashy Sinaloa cartel guys wearing the hats and being about that life, having social media, having trips to Paris and showing a video of them riding in a Lamborghini somewhere and making fun of the government and being Robin Hoods. That shit's over.
Wow.
This is an ultra paramilitary, ultra violent takeover cartel. Go into a town, gather all the military aged kids in the middle of the town square, and give them this classic offer.
There it is. Yep. Yep. So is it silver or lead?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And another thing people also must kind of like factor into this situation. Like I was a part of a group of people that was a very serious attempt by Mexican and American interests to Americanize police forces in Mexico and professionalize them. We went through a lot of training, all of it paramilitary, in a way, and got to be trained by some of the best in the world. Some of NSW guys coming back from Afghanistan, showing us how to do a protection detail for Mohammed Karzai and how
Hmm.
that translates into taking care of somebody in a place like Tijuana, for example. And we learned well. And a lot of the people that I worked with who did an amazing job of taking Tijuana out of the most dangerous cities list after the government was done with them, basically. And as it was done with me, a lot of us were basically given notice to leave, you know? And where do you think people like me, who are now really sought after as subject matter guys that learn a bunch of stuff through experience and also by working one of the most amazing universities on the planet when it comes to modern warfare, which is Mexico, where do you think people like me go for work?
Oh, I can take a guess.
$12,000 every 2 weeks was the first offer that I got, and this is a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Plus, we would get to keep what we found is what
Oh,
the offer was that was done. This is when I was still active,
wow.
and a lot of people took that offer.
Yeah.
So where are they? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, once again, I can guess. How did you avoid that? Were you hardwired from your youth in order this to be different, or were you
So
swayed? Was it tempting, or what was your
so
how did you avoid
th
that?
this is the and I get a lot of that, because like, hey Ed, how did you avoid it? What makes you better? Nothing makes you better, man. I was tempted like a motherfucker. I mean, everybody has a number. I'm sure if I approached you with a number, you might say no. But then if I approach you with your family's phone numbers and pictures and stuff like that, you might say yes,
That's a different
right?
deal.
It's a different thing. So I was the part of the program that I was a part of would put all of our guys through FBI background checks, number one, and then we would have polygraph exams done on us regularly, psychological, we blood tested, all that stuff was done regularly. They would do surprise house visits on us to see what we were doing, if we had a TV that was extra, if we had a
Ah.
gold AK on the wall and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest advantages specifically is that I was very much suicidal for most of my career, which
Mm.
meant that I really didn't want to live to over 33. I had this whole mindset of not getting past the age of Jesus. So I didn't
Where
have
did
any
that come
kids.
from?
It's probably childhood trauma.
Mm.
I had some childhood shit going on in my life, which basically made me try to overachieve in everything that I could
Mm.
once I got bigger.
Okay.
So that job was very much a very long suicide attempt for me, realistically. Everybody telling me not to go there, my mom included, and a few of my family members were like, "That you're insane for doing it."
Uh-huh.
So I was very kind of like self-destructive in that way. So they didn't really have an angle on me. Like what could they offer? I guess I think that mentality, even though it was pretty fucked up, kind of kept me on the edges of things. And also I grew up as a skater kid, grew up as a punk rock kid as well. So the whole cartel lifestyle, luxury aspect of it never really appealed to me. It was
Mm.
more like legit. I was there for the violence and the excitement and the adrenaline. So that wasn't an issue for me, but for other people, it was.
Yeah. What changed? What changed for you? Because you're older than that now.
Yeah. Well, first off, I had to leave that job, which it was pretty pretty horrible one. You want to talk about people being programmed and used by the government. People talk about conspiracy theories and all you want, but you were a war fighter. You know that when they form people like us, they try and convince us of certain things. They're the bad guys. They're subhuman. They deserve this. You are on the good guy side.
Mm.
The difference between you and me is that when I adopted that responsibility, I was spit on by the people that was supposed to be protected. I wasn't the hero because I was a cop, and cops in Mexico are corrupt and horrible. And as the questioning that you just happened, like, aren't you like, how did you get out of it? How were you not corrupt? That's always the assumption. So it was it I had people with me during a big part of it. People like Lieutenant Colonel Izaola, legendary lawman in Mexico, who basically formed me from training all the way to the street, who were legit trying to do something good for this country. I had people around me that went through this formation with me, and as I went through this process of almost 12 years working in that environment, a lot of the good ones started waking up to the fact that it wasn't going to get any better, and they started to leave.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I found myself in a room 12 years later, surrounded by a new command asking me to play ball with them as they were attempting to go after a single cartel now, not two.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that basically they were asking me to go play ball for one of them. And I had to leave. That was it.
How'd you get out of that room?
I said I was going to go talk to somebody about what the offer and basically printed out my resignation. Uh, no questions. People were like, "Look, are you going to resign it?" Like people knew me in the office and the secretaries and stuff like that. Like, what? I said, yes, keep it on the down low, print it out, let me sign it and file it. I handed everything over in a trash bag, including an MP5, four magazines, Glock, uh, Satcom radio, uh, smoke grenades, and all my shit in a trash bag. I handed it into the armory and left that next night to the
Okay.
U.S.
Oh, wow. Jeez. Well, before I get to that, when you talk about the polygraph and the background checks and all that sort of thing, did you find that those were effective in keeping? Did you because of that? Did you trust people, or were you still like, okay, I see this poly, but
Yeah.
that person, I know that maybe he's not what he says he is, and yet he still passed all this stuff. Like, how did all that work in? Did that a situation like that occur? What were these background checks and all that? How did that kind of affect your psyche and your trust of your teammates?
I mean, idealistically, I first thought it was going to be enough,
Mm.
because I'm young and dumb. You don't know shit. You think these guys can actually detect lies with these detectors because as soon as those tests started happening, we started to figure them out.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of one of the fucking tricks that they did on us. Hey, Ed, I'm going to calibrate my polygraph machine. I'm going to lay out these 10 cards on the table. Flip one over. Don't show me which it is. Flip one over. The card's number 7. Cool. I'm going to ask you if it's card number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, until I reach 10. You say no to everyone, even the one that you just saw, and I will know which one it is if I calibrate my machine correctly. Is it 1? No. Is it 2? No. Is it 10? Is it 7? No. It's 7. Holy shit. Polygraph guy knows his shit. Can I turn over the other cards? No, 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 no. Let's move on with the exercise. They're all number 7s.
Mm.
If they can convince you that this fucking thing works and that they can actually detect that they're looking for admissions and all of this type of stuff, all it took was for them to do a few exams like that, and people like me that had internet access could figure a lot of these things out, and
Mm.
a lot of them did. I think the polygraph was good as an intro into our workspace. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting filter,
Yeah.
but other than a way of maintaining trust with people, no, people got wise to it. Those tricks work on a few people a few times, but they were doing this stuff on a yearly basis. So, I would fall asleep in some of the exams after a while.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, you need to wake up. Oh shit, sorry.
Oh man.
Um, so they would work as far as a filter to get access sometimes,
Mm.
sometimes. And then afterwards, they became more of a just something you had to go through.
Yeah.
And and also just realize this. I mean, you could be clean as shit, and all of a sudden, somebody somewhere in the right situation just approaches you with something, and now you're not. And that
Right.
happened a lot.
Oh man.
People finding multi-million dollars worth of cash somewhere in a wall,
Mm.
and telling the army to set up a perimeter because they found a laboratory, and then not answering the radios for a few hours.
Yeah.
And then you open up then the army opens up the door and the radios are in the room turned off and all these fuckers are gone. These people that you work with for years, and you went to a birthday party of one of them, and
Yeah.
now them and their families are gone into an afterlife that I don't know. Maybe they made it, maybe they didn't. I don't know. But this is reality of stuff down in Mexico. There's
Yeah.
it's insane that we were used as a tool to try and combat this, but we were treated like subhuman pieces of shit, realistically,
Yeah.
and the pay that we were paid not that well. The medical was pretty horrible, and there was absolutely no concept of retiring for anybody like me.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that people also need to understand about that field, I remember reading this quote from True Detective, where I think Russ Cole says,
Yeah.
"Be careful what you get good at." You know,
I remember
in
that
life.
line. It's a great line.
Beautiful line. Well, if you're a cop in Mexico and you professionalize yourself to the degree that I did, when I got out, I was a policía segundo, a second class police officer through the organization map that they had back then, which is pretty high up. It's a pretty high rank. If you leave a police unit like that by quitting or resigning, or if you're fired, you're not eligible to join another police organization anywhere in the country.
Hmm.
So again, what does somebody like me
Right.
do after a job like that? So
Yeah.
the policies have been creating some of the monsters that you are now fighting,
Yeah.
and some of the monsters you will be fighting in the next foreseeable decade were created very much by some of these policies on both sides of the border. People like me who, like, if I have a conscience, gladly, but some of the people that I work with might not, you know.
Yeah. Man.
Um,
That the poly, I did the lifestyle poly years and years ago, and I worked it into my fourth novel, The Devil's Hand, in the beginning as a kind of a tool to catch readers up on what's been going on, and I like to try to do that creatively in the books. But seeing that happen, and then seeing people either turned or already have been turned, already essentially working against you, but next to you in the stack as you're going to go into a house or something like that, what does that do to your psyche as far as trust goes, not just with your element, but for people in general?
I mean, I didn't have any words for it till I came to the U.S. and I went through. I've actually just finished with about 2 years worth of therapy to try and figure some of these things out. I mean, to people being stuck on survival mode, and I think you know what this is. I mean, basically, you know, there's condition red, condition yellow, and whatever. But imagine the experiences that you had out there, and imagine those experiences happening where you grew up, and you can't escape them because you have to come back to them every now and then. So I have family that lives down there. These are people that I had to fight who were speaking the same language that I was. And sometimes when they would kill some of ours and we would kill some of them, we would have the same funerary service space. So uh, it's it's a overwhelming space of paranoia, I
Yeah.
think, in a big way. It traumatized a lot of people that I work with, and myself including, and a lot of them probably don't know that it happened to them
Mm.
when it comes to trusting people and relationships and trying to figure out if somebody was on your side or if somebody wanted to shoot you in the back of the head. Um, there was a lot of that. For me, I trusted the people that I suffered with.
Mm.
Is the way I would quantify who I would trust and who I wouldn't. When I went through I was a regional sub commander, was the highest rank that I achieved, and I wasn't a commander because I was too young.
Mm.
So I was running through the ranks either by competition or by my competition getting arrested and or killed. So I rose through the ranks pretty quickly. But when I got into a command position, one of the lessons that uh, again, one of the most influential people in that field, Lieutenant Colonel Izaola, kind of said is that you have to be able to do what everybody else does in your group, and they have to do what you do. And ego doesn't belong in a command position. Um, and I took that to heart. And a lot of people that I worked with had the same kind of concept and knowledge base. People that would invest in their own training. I mean, I went
Mm.
around the country when I was still active, training with a bunch of people in the U.S. Some of them are still scratching their heads when I tell them, like, I was in a class with you. Like, when? You know? Um, I think amongst my group and the people that I was working with, there were a few true believers, and I think the time when those were few and far between is the time when I thought it was a time to leave.
Let's say 1992, 93, or 10, 11, 12, that time frame. What did you want to do with your life back then?
Uh, my brother passed away when I was 13. It's his birthday today, by the way,
Oh
which
man,
is
sorry.
pretty weird. No, he lived a great life. He was 19 when he passed away.
Oh,
Um, he is the middle brother, and I'm the smallest one. And my big brother Neto is still, kicking it, but it's my mom, my dad, three kids, three boys, classic Mexican family,
mm,
close, um, very tight knit, stable as shit. My mom's a saint. My dad, man's man, working type thing.
what did he do?
He had an electrical engineer.
Oh,
So he build transformer boxes and
oh,
electrical light posts and stuff like that. So again, none of this madness.
yeah.
My brother Eric passed away when he was 19. He was, for lack of a better word, the best of us. He was the hope. He was the life of the party. My dad has 11 brothers, and when my brother would show up, legit, he would get a standing ovation.
No kidding.
That's how popular he was. His funeral was almost like a party. That's probably the biggest party I've ever been to. It was very influential.
Yeah.
When he died, my mother went into a psychiatric situation, and my dad basically went into alcoholism. And I was left to be a feral kid
Oh wow.
at 13. So I normalized a lot of stuff that I thought was normal for a 13-year-old, like getting a job and
Mm.
being kind of homeless for a bit and just being left to my own devices. Uh, I had this I had this traumatic event around that time where my mother was on the balcony waiting for my brother that was never going to come home. Um, and I got home in my skateboard at night. Uh, I saw her in the balcony, and when I got to the light of the front door, she was kind of excited because she thought it was my brother that passed away. So when she saw it was me, she looked disappointed and saw right through me, basically. And that's when my suicidal tendencies were born. And then the whole aspect of it shouldn't have been me or I should have died instead of my brother aspect kind of was born. Um, that trauma led me to basically overachieve. That's a radioactive spider that bit me, I guess.
Mm.
So I went into business for my own, I shoplifted a bit. I did some hood rat shit with my friends. The first locks that I ever picked were when I was a kid, and we would open up backyard pools for some of the cartel houses that the army had taken, and we would skate the pools in some of these places. For example, um, I studied a lot. I was pretty good at school. And a big reason of that was for my mom to pay attention to me, but because she was still off mourning my brother for most of my early life.
Yeah.
So eventually I got into medicine and I did 2 years of medical school.
No
And
way.
yeah, I did 2 years of medical school trying to figure that out.
Oh wow.
And a lot of that was legit trying to get it to the attention of my mother and my dad to be proud of me or to put me on the same level as my brother, which is impossible. Can't compete with a ghost, but that was my trauma. 9/11 hit and I had to look for options, and the only option was an ad in the newspaper looking for unmarried young expendable idiots like myself.
No way.
And when I showed the newspaper to my brother and my father, they said, "No fucking way in hell are you capable of going and doing this.
Mm.
You're probably going to drop out as soon as the pressure comes on,"
Hmm.
which is the worst thing you can tell me.
Right. Yeah. Tell you can't do something. What
Yeah.
happened to your brother?
A car accident, a very tragic car accident. He was riding in the back with his girlfriend, and his best friend was riding in the front. Everybody survived except him.
Oh man.
Um, but something about that. experience basically gave me this. And again, a lot of people want to talk about being born supernatural, like with the supernatural drive or something like that. For me, it was born. Like again, 2 years of therapy brought me to the conclusion that it was born right there and then. Going from skateboarding and having spiked hair for about that big and having a punk band in Tijuana. We were called Arm the Homeless was the name of my punk band, by the way. It's a pretty fucking fitting name. Thinking about it now. I found myself in the middle of a refurbished prison being trained by former Mexican Army Special Forces units in police work, which was strange, or I didn't fit what I expected. But it was paramilitary training because we were about to go and do basically a paramilitary operation, was just trying to recover a whole segment of the country.
Was like a boot camp, or what you envisioned a boot camp was from films, or what you've been told?
I thought, yeah, we were sold the whole aspect of being a professional modern police.
Okay. And is this a national police force? Is it?
There's no national police force at this time. The federal police is basically the army dressed in gray in the back of my truck. Okay. There's no federal police to be. So this is a different time.
What is the organization? What was it? Was it?
It was basically a federalized state level organization. Okay. Experiment, basically. That's why they sent a lieutenant colonel in the form of Lizola to run the academy, to run the program, and then to run us when we got out. Okay. So they basically created the whole process of creating the tool that he would then use to try and fight this issue.
Wow.
He was very smart. He was very smart about it. And there was a lot of people behind that effort that it succeeded for a while. And like all things in Mexico, anything that's successful usually lasts less than 5 years because that's a term of a presidency. And when the next one comes in, everybody gets kicked out, amnesia over and over again.
Do you remember how many people you started that with, and how many people made it through? Was it a course of attrition, or were you?
Yeah, so it was probably 60 people that were in that line with me. Clean shaved heads. A few of them got a giant blister in the top of their heads because they're never been exposed to sunlight. Oh my God! Yeah. A few people dropped out for medical reasons. A few were pulled out because the FBI background check doesn't give results right off the bat. So some people were 3 months in training and they would be pulled out because they were found out to be trafficking drugs at some point in their past in the U.S. or stuff like that. Yeah. Or they found some sort of family tie to a cartel. Right. So people like that were pulled out. People dropped out for injuries. People just went crazy inside because of the amount of, these guys were there to basically make us quit. The first thing they told us was, hey, aquí hay pan y verga para comer y el pan se acabó hace 3 días. There's bread and dick here to eat, and bread ran out 3 days ago, And this isn't the military in the United States. This is the third fucking world. AK-47s being fired around us to simulate reality. Dangerous ass fucking training. Oh, I'm sure. But retarded, dangerous, stupid training. Physical abuse. With the females, some sexual shit went on. So a few fucking instructors had to be fucking put in their place. But it was like some of us were physically beaten. This is the type of environment. This is not like, hey, do push-ups. No, like a stick would come out,
How long was that training?
6 months.
6 months.
It's a 6-month cycle, and then you're placed on a 6-month probation as a newbie outside. So it's a year-long process, a year and a half long process.
No kidding. Did the physical abuse and that sort of attrition type training give way eventually to lessons on how to actually operate these weapon systems, some tactics, some medical, anything like that? No,
they led into basically having a pool of candidates that are now ready to be trained by the streets and the older guys that are outside waiting for us. That's what it did.
Wow. So when you graduate that and you show up, are you staying regional? Are you still near Tijuana, or do you have to go over to the train?
They spread us out. They spread us out basically. So, for example, I was shown how to shoot a Beretta 92 FS pistol,
Uh,
and I shot 20 rounds out of it.
yeah.
And I got out and I got a Glock in a box,
Yeah.
and I never seen one in my fucking life.
Uh-huh.
Imagine this scene of 5 or 6 of me somewhere in the back lot of this government office, opening up a Glock from inside of its box, never seeing one. The only exposition you had to a semi-auto was maybe a maybe a Beretta or a Colt.
Mm,
All of a sudden you see this hammerless the Nintendo controller gun.
mm,
You're like, what the fuck is this?
mm.
So ignorance, danger, stupidity. But we got out and we had a group of people that had been at the job for a year already or a year and a half. And these guys were like battle hardened fuckers. I mean, these are like 5 of them would go into shootouts with unknown numbers. You could see it in their eyes. You could see the cobbled together tactical equipment that they had. Some of them were having their plate carriers sewn by their wives because there's this whole joke around us that we were sent out to war naked because we didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff we would get was procured.
Oh, understood. Liberated. Navy Federal Credit Union. I've been a member of Navy Federal Credit Union since 1996 and have only had incredible experiences. Getting a new car is exciting, and you deserve a hassle-free buying experience. You can get a decision in seconds and enjoy great rates. With everything you need in one place, Navy Federal's Car Buying Center is your one-stop shop for researching, financing, buying, protecting, and enjoying your next car. You could search for new and used cars, access vehicle history reports, enjoy discounts on auto insurance, and more. And you can make the most of your time on the road wherever you go with our flagship credit card. Whether you're taking a trip to relax or see somewhere new, you deserve a travel card that does the work for you. The flagship credit card will earn you 3 times points on travel, plus up to $100 in statement credits towards TSA PreCheck or Global Entry, and a free year of Amazon Prime. With 2 times the points and all purchases outside of travel, the rewards don't have to end when your vacation does. For more on Navy Federal's car buying experience and flagship rewards, visit NavyFederal.org. Open to the armed forces, the DoD, veterans, and their families. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA. Visa is a registered service mark of Visa used by Navy Federal under license. NavyFederalCreditUnion.org.
I remember going into a house with we were working with a group, we would call them boom groups, Base de Operaciones Mixtas. Basically, we would have people from the Army, people from the Federal Investigation Service, people like this was just basically the Avengers of law enforcement in the area get together. I remember being something big happened. Some cops got assassinated, and a command got assassinated, and basically it led to the whole city basically being on siege, and every single house that was suspected was hit. And we hit this house that had we found a bunch of guns in there, like an armory, like a whole armory in that house. And as soon as I entered that place, I'm like, holy shit, look at all this. I felt like a scene Commando when he breaks into that gun store, basically.
Oh, yeah.
AR-15s, AK-47s. I think there was a man pad in there at some point. I'm not too sure about that, but I think I remember seeing a man pad. Grenades, a bunch of shit that probably walked off Camp Pendleton that made its way there, that type of stuff. And one of the Army guys that was in front of me started fucking just putting on plate carriers, and he's like, grab one that fits.
Yeah, seriously, grab that shopping cart.
And I'm like, really? No, we can't do that, right? Like in my mind, it's still idealistic and stupid and young. And I grab one, put it on. Then I find some magazines for the rifle that I had. Then I find a Black Hawk a 2-point sling that was better than the than the luggage strap that I was using.
Wow.
And stuff like that started to happen, and I started to realize that this is the fucking Wild West. This is anything that I was ready for or
Yeah.
had any idea about. I went downstairs and the army guys were having abalone, canned abalone in the kitchen
Hey,
that they found at the house.
nice. It's
And
good
they said
stuff.
they pulled out a chair, and I said, I'm I'm not better than them, you know, so I should join them probably. I sat down and had a pretty nice
Yeah.
abalone cocktail in a glass at
Abalone's
this
good stuff.
safe house somewhere. Um,
So
the
you were trained up to like on the tactical side of the house. It sounds like, so there's not, where are you getting your missions, your intel, or their target packages? Are you anyone being trained in investigations? Or are you working with another unit that's doing these investigations and saying, okay, we're
so
targeting this person?
so that they divided us up into the intelligence branch
Mm,
and the operations branch.
okay.
If you're in operations, you are a garbage man. You're the
Mm,
janitor. You do whatever.
mm,
So one day we'll show up and like it's plain clothes, it's plain clothes. One day we'll show up and wear this uniform. Why? Don't ask. Just wear that uniform, you know? So basically operations is everything. And the intelligence guys were just relegated to that. They couldn't go out in the streets. They couldn't do anything active and direct, and they would basically paint targets for us in a lot of ways. They would move around in civilian unmarked vehicles. We couldn't interact with them. We call them the X-Man as a joke.
uh,
Um, so there was that type of division. We would basically do site exploitation whenever we found the opportunity, and
mhm,
we would feed everything to them if we found anything, and we would keep our own uh, information and intelligence as well. The further we got into this time and the further we got into the experience, we started basically becoming more and more independent. We realized that there was a big strength in basically becoming independent and isolated in a lot of ways as far
mm,
as this office went,
mhm.
because we were one operational group and there were several,
Okay.
and the other ones weren't as trustworthy as ours, maybe, or the other ones were maybe working an angle we didn't know about. And command basically made a big effort to basically keep us
Yeah.
contained, very, very much like a cell.
Yeah. I can see that. And so you open up this Glock when you get to your unit. Do they hand you like an AR or something like that? And do you remember your first mission? Like what is your first mission, and or the first memorable one anyway that
Yeah,
comes to mind? And what was
it's
that like?
it's it's not a cool one, but yeah, a Glock. I remember some of the guys spraying it with double WD-40 because they said it didn't come with any sort of lubricant.
Mm,
It did, by the way. But if you don't know anything like that, what is this weird copper
mm,
colored thing on the Glock that comes with it? People didn't
mm.
know. So I remember a Glock. There was in the army there was a AR. There was 223 AR-15s, Colts, semi-autos. There was a sporter one. It was a
Mm.
long. We
Oh yeah.
used to call it. We used to call them the muletas, or the crutches, basically, just
Okay.
giant rifles.
Yeah.
And G3s
Oh
and
yeah.
FAN G3s and FALs every now and then would be
All right.
brought out of the armory.
Not
So
bad. Not bad.
I grabbed that G3
Nice.
myself, because I know that
It's a solid move.
basically carrying around a thunderbolt bolt
Yeah.
thrower.
Uh-huh.
Um, my first day on the job, and it's something I've talked about a few times. It's not cool. It's memorable, very memorable, traumatic in a lot of ways. Uh, I'm at the base. I'm one of the new guys, so anything horrible needs to be done. This is who you call, I
Oh yeah.
guess.
I'm familiar.
So one of the older guys runs in and says uh, to another older guy, "Hey, grab one of the new guys and get the cizallas, which are the bolt cutters, and come with me." And I'm like, bolt cutters? This sounds like a job for me, I guess. So I went and grabbed the bolt cutters, ran into the car, and we were like calmly driving somewhere. I was like, "Where are we going?" It's like, "No questions, you know." Fucking Mexican, sin preguntar, cabrón. You have some new. Um, we were on our way to cut somebody down off a bridge. Uh, somebody asked for some help around that, and we were on our way basically to cut somebody down from a bridge. I get there and it's a pedestrian bridge. It's there's two bodies on it. One of them is not complete, and the other one is very complete. Obvious signs of torture. Still, the wires that were used to strangle him to death are still on his neck and plastic on his head. Uh, they roll a truck down underneath it to try and lower it, but it was still going to have to fall a bit,
Hmm.
and there's no way we can pull it up, you know. So I go up there with my bolt cutters in my first day of work, and I cut it down.
Wow.
Uh, when we're laying him down off that, and forensic services are coming, a lot of them were female, so they didn't want to do that job. That's why we were fucking pulled in. Um, I I said to the older guy, "This is fucking horrible." But like these monsters of people that did this are fucking monstrous fucking people. We should find them all and kill them, basically, in my mind, right? That's verbalize it in some stupid young dude way to this older guy. And he turned to me and said, "You're an idiot. You're stupid. This is kindness." I said, "What do you mean?" I mean, he said, at least his family has a body to bury. This is kindness. The body's a gift, he said. I remember just realizing at that moment that I was in a place where this was kindness, and my ass went through my throat. He's like, this is not what this not a clear cut and dry good and bad situation here. I think the complexity of it just started expanding in my young, stupid mind. That
Did
was my first job. That was my first day on the job.
Did you ever find out why they were killed?
No, but I can assume that it's because they were working for the rivals. Most of the people that end up on a bridge are working for another side, and they are exposed. And since you can't get to high leadership, you'll usually go after the small time distributors and people that are on the bottom. So he's probably a kid.
Did you have
Probably is.
a mission statement, or was it articulated to you what you're doing in this new unit? Is it targeting cartels? Is it counter-narcotics? Is it countering human
It's
trafficking? Is it
It says anything that nobody wants to go, anything that the local municipal level authorities don't want to touch,
mhm.
it's us, So any high impact crime basically is what they would say.
Okay,
So anything that smells of organized crime was what we went after. And if you
okay,
know anything about organized crime in Mexico, it's
everything.
human trafficking, drugs, vehicle theft, extortion, political blackmail. It's everything basically. So
Yeah,
we went after anything and everything that would expose itself.
yeah.
The only thing that was told to us is, the hand that steals will hide itself, but the one that spends will give the other one away. So have eyes and ears open and go out there. And if anybody's exposing that other hand, pull on that string.
Wow.
That was the only thing that was said to us as far as like direction, I guess, at the
Yeah.
start. Um,
Did you ever wonder who you're working for and why? As far as like, when did it, like near the end, obviously, but at the beginning, did you ever have questions like that, or were you just targeting these essentially criminal syndicates that show themselves? But were you ever like, oh, how many of these are there? Are we just going after one, or two, or like, did you ever question that sort of thing at the
yeah,
beginning?
yeah. It starts dawning on you that maybe you're really going after one of them, maybe, and not the others, or
Yeah,
that. And it happened sometimes that where we
yeah,
would go somewhere and would say, "Don't go there by high level." So step back.
yeah.
It's like, why? Because it's from high up, And we just saw the conviction of one of the guys that was basically in charge of a lot of the planning and the strategy when it comes to nationwide counter cartel activities.
Mm,
Convicted of cartel
mm,
uh, activities in the United States. Martinez Luna, the former top police chief in Mexico. So like I know that we were probably batting for one side or the other in a lot of our activities, but
Yeah.
again, money goes up, bullshit goes down. You know,
Yeah.
so if we were working aside, we were never told about it, and we were
Yeah.
never paid for it. So,
Yeah.
um, but it's looking back at it now, I can tell that there were high level influence there was high level influence at
Mm.
the very top.
Mm.
Now, how high it went, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the work that I did was during the Felipe Calderon administration, and his chief of police was public safety again was just convicted in the United States of cartel ties.
Yeah.
So
Man.
legit, you don't know.
Yeah.
Now you don't know. You know,
Right.
like I imagine that there was some shit going on, but again, money goes uphill, you know, bullshit
Yeah.
goes down.
Did you have so if you're targeting somebody, let's say, and your group is getting out and ready to go, did you have like standard operating procedures or tactics that you would lean towards? Let's say, okay, 3 a.m. we hit these guys in their house, or we get them when they're moving between their house and let's say a known place of business or a place that they go. Are you doing surveillance and setting that up?
Yeah.
And what would be the because you're not, it doesn't sound like you guys have night vision and thermals at this point early on.
Yeah.
But if you did, I'm not sure.
Not early on. Later on, we had monocle nods.
So was night something that you looked at, or was it movement in cars? Like where you were looking for, were you looking at where they were most vulnerable, or would you just be told, hey, we're going to go grab this guy at lunch at X location. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't use a lot of nods because you guys didn't let us play with yours and you didn't show us how to use yours because for obvious reasons, you know, ITARs and all that. But we eventually got access to nods, not for you guys. So, you know, whatever. Monocle nods, but that was towards the end of it. What we like, a lot of the stuff just came from doing this over and over again.
Yeah.
So an example of this, we were working with small units, basically, small cells. So depende del chango la pedrada, depending on the size of the monkey, the rock is what we would say. So everybody in our group had a bunch of catfishing accounts for social media. So we were always looking at people in multiple layers. So social media started being a thing towards the mid part of my operational experience, and we were very much exploiting the shit out of it as far as having the ability to have virtual eyes in different places. Yeah. We would do site reconnaissance. We would pick up garbage to look at what people were dumping out of their houses. We would look at cloning packaging services and stuff like that to basically drive around and drove around in some of these areas. We would recruit a lot of ex-taxi drivers for the units if they had that experience because they were the best and most knowledgeable about moving around cities. So most of the I'll give you an example. We found a house that was very much suspected of being a house where they would load cars, basically. We couldn't figure out exactly where the cars were coming from. We couldn't figure out exactly where the drugs were coming from. We couldn't figure out a lot of things. You know, it was too random. There's a bunch of stuff happening there, some of it a lot of it legal, and there was then that aspect to it. It's a high value neighborhood, and if you want to hide illegal activities, hide it in a high value neighborhood in Tijuana, because those fuckers, the neighbors, will always complain or be suspicious about everybody out there because that's the cheapest security system you can have. You know, just set yourself up in a high value neighborhood in Tijuana, and the neighbors will watch your back for you. Basically, anything that's out of place, they'll call it in. So we had to figure that out. So we looked at the lightest colored people in our groups, and including myself, and went to basically around that neighborhood to try and rent an apartment. I myself as somebody from San Diego, basically. And that's again big language skill effort. A lot of our guys had language skills of that nature for the same reason. So rent a property and basically normalize shit in that area, so you become part of the baseline. That's a big part of it, I guess, for us.
Mm.
Normalize shit. It's
Yeah.
very tempting to go after something you see as an opportunity,
Yeah.
but it's also very effective to wait and see, to see if one guy relates to another, and to have all that information before you hit that beehive.
Hmm.
Um, so normalizing stuff around the property and behaviors, like, we figured out that they had a house that had a bunch of security on there. So we started putting a bunch of pigeon and bird food in certain places that would fuck with that.
Mm.
We started setting these things off on purpose with a bag of cats in certain parts of the property just to figure these guys out as far
Mm.
as their reactions and shit like that.
Right.
And eventually we normalized the fact that at night these fucking cats would get into the back spot and turn on fucking lights, and people would wake up, shut things off, and go back to bed. So we created an opportunity for ourselves
Yeah.
eventually. 22 caliber suppressed pistols or ball bearings on the street lights during the day, to make yourself a dark spot,
Hmm.
and multiple false reports of other situations happening around the area while
Yeah.
we hit was something we would kind of do at times.
Yeah.
Um, and again, the multiple reports of hitting a house, multiple reports around the area had to be done for the local authorities because they would also be in on some of these things.
Yeah.
Um, and also the fact that how we would act, we were all dressed up in civilian clothes and very much acted and spoke the jargon of not cops, because
Yeah.
that is also a big part of the camouflage, urban camouflage.
Interesting.
So you learn how to fake it, I guess.
Yeah. What,
um,
what's the highest ranking
uh,
guy you went after? Was there one that comes to mind that was the most senior, let's say cartel member or something like that you went after, that had security around him that was fairly robust or different from other people that you'd hit, or what one stands out in your mind?
I can't talk about any of the ones that I went after, but I mean, there's a lot. I mean, anybody at that time, it was basically lieutenants that we would go after.
Okay.
So people coming in, basically setting up cells for certain criminal organizations that were sometimes 80 to 200 people strong, right?
Dang.
So they could gather 200 people with AKs in a night if they wanted to. So
Wow.
this level of this level of people is the types of people that we went after. And I mean, some of them were big names, and I
Yeah.
don't want to talk about any of them. Well, all I know is a lot of them are dead and gone now, but still,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's still kind of scary to talk about.
Oh
But
yeah.
the the amount of work we did in that area took that city off the list. Number one city, most dangerous city on the planet, and didn't show up after a few years of work we did there. Um, I think specifically the phenomenon of types of people that would come into the city and would work. And this isn't somebody that I ever worked against, but I'll just tell the story about these guys. We got to see the Zetas in Baja. And the Zetas are a pretty interesting group, and I know there's a bunch of movies out there and fiction out there about them.
Mm.
I actually met some of them, and was trained by people that were part of the unit where they were drawn from. So, um, special forces now in Mexico are different, very different. I got to train with the GAFES, Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales. A lot of these guys actually got the experience of quelling an uprising in the jungles of Chiapas with the ZLN groups. So experienced individuals. Selection back then was different.
Mm.
There was a reason why there was not a lot of them. A lot of them had careers, engineering careers, language skills. Some of them went to School of the Americas type level stuff, and there's a few pictures of them in Bragg, for example.
Yeah, I was gonna say School of the
So
Americas. For people listening, you can Google it.
yeah, it's not a school that lets you it's not a hearts and minds school is all I'm going to say. It's so this level of people were hired by the Gulf cartel's head, Ociel Cardenas, to basically be his bodyguarding team. And in Mexico, if you have a bodyguarding team, every now and then you'll send them out to do something else, you know, and
Hmm.
they figured out that they were amazing enforcers. I mean, hey, go intimidate these guys and they'll do it in a fucking ultra militaristic, very organized, specialized way.
Yeah.
They figured out that they can start their own cartels basically. And that's what they did. And like special forces, they basically adopted the whole let's expand our capabilities by training other people
Yeah.
aspect. So they were very good at that, recruiting and training up other people, and a group of them at some point made their way to Tijuana and participated in a prison break, like A team
Wow.
style level prison break.
Yeah.
Uh, they dressed up in medical uh, attire
Mm.
and took advantage of a regular pickup of a detainee inside of the Tijuana prison that had cirrhosis of the liver, I think, or maybe it was a kidney failure situation going on. I'm not too sure.
Mm.
But basically, they took advantage of the fact that he had regular doctor's appointments that he was picked up in. And they arrived in an ambulance. They had people there overnighting with precision rifles already set up. So when the gatekeeper stood out and the tower guard was there at the ready, they lit all of them up. And they had already infiltrated guns into the prison, so they were shooting their way out of the prison
Wow.
as they were being rescued on the inside.
Wow.
The whole prison break took about 2, 3 minutes, and all these guys got away with the people that they were there to get out, basically. And nobody responded
Mm.
because they put out the word
Yeah. Hey.
beforehand. And it was to see it basically to go there and see it after
Hmm.
and see the 3 round burst precision um, groupings
Mm.
and how they hit everything that they shot at was
Yeah.
pretty interesting. And just the sophistication of it was pretty kind of mind blowing to see.
Yeah. So it sounds like most of this time, these 12 years that you're doing, the training you're getting seems like on the job training until later when you're going up and getting some maybe more formal training. But during this whole time, just to stay alive, you seem like a natural student, and you're learning, you're observing, you're making that a part of your experience. It's now a part of what you do now and what you teach now and what you talk about now. But as you're going through all this and you're hitting these houses and arresting these people and doing these things, you're now essentially a student of organized crime, a student of in particular, regionally in particular, but there are commonalities worldwide with some of these things. But when did you start noticing, or did you know ahead of time, a connection to the occult or the maybe the religious side of this?
So I mean, growing up,
Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Yeah.
My family specifically were all Guadalupanos growing up. Guadalupanos are
Mm.
basically acolytes of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And if you look into it a bit deeper, they're basically holdouts from the Aztec Empire that said we were going to convert, but on our own terms.
Okay.
That's what Guadalupanos are in a way.
Mm.
If you look at the Virgin of Guadalupe, what she really is an Aztec fertility goddess
Huh.
that was adopted by the Catholics, which is exactly what the Catholics do and have been doing across the world for centuries. There were skeletons around family altars when I was growing up, and very much Santa Muerte was there growing up as well. It was just something that I grew up with, cultural.
Mm.
Um, then later on, when I went into the unit, I figured out that most of the guys that I was working with were all Santa Muerte practitioners.
Mm.
That was like a part of the whole culture that we
Mm.
had. Some, at least in the small unit that I was a part of, it was very much used as a psychological warfare aspect, I guess, or they would very much kind of have it as a memento mori type thing, and it was
Mm.
very much like a unit thing. So Santa Muerte was very much a faith practice amongst group members and also criminals. We would hit houses and we would find these giant Santa Muerte statues in rooms, sometimes with pictures of her command structure on the bottom of them with some sort of witchcraft being cast on them.
Yeah.
Mexico is a very spiritual place. It's one of the most Catholic countries in the world. And the amount of the influx of occultist practices coming in from all sorts of places into Mexico has always been like a main factor. Some of the darker stuff, though, that you see is in Santa Muerte, which is easy. It's very easy to point at as like a demonic, evil-looking faith practice. But realistically, when you look at it, it's a veneration of life and death. It's a duality goddess. That's what it is, Santa Muerte. The first exposition that most people got to Santa Muerte was through Breaking Bad.
Mm.
That's the first time most people saw a statue of death. So the cartel specific evilness of it probably comes from the first exposition you got to Santa Muerte as a culture. But realistically, it's one of the most benign ones. I really don't see a lot of there's an absolute revulsion of blood sacrifice and or human sacrifice in any of it, because it's a life and death, the duality spirit practice. And again, I grew up in it, so I would know. It's been deformed and used in ways after, now. The first public form of Santa Muerte was after the year 2000. Before that, everybody would venerate or worship it in your houses. It would be something you would talk about. It was a middle finger to the church for some.
Yeah,
that's what it was. And but then you progress in time and you get to the 90s when cartels started kind of formalizing and solidifying. And you get the phenomenons of the narco satanicos, the Satanist cartels, the Satanist narcos. I don't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but there's a famous case of this of a Mexican American individual that had exposition to Afro-Caribbean palo, which is basically a form of folk magic practice coming out of Africa, but that settled in the Caribbean. It utilizes a lot of blood sacrifices, body parts, bones, and stuff like that to create these things called ngangas, which are basically vessels that they use to capture a spirit, is what they call them. At some point in the 90s, a very known occultist started basically getting famous for creating some of these ngangas for some cartel forces. And a lot of these cartel groups became really successful and rich afterwards. So there was a belief in it that started kind of like really permeating throughout the culture. I think he abducted and murdered an American and used his brain in an nganga that got him into a lot of trouble. And he died in a shootout with authorities in Mexico. But I think that's the first time we started getting a glimpse of some of these cross-pollination of cartels realizing the power of true belief and or the power of some of these occult practices. And I mean, a witch told me this, a Mexican bruja de rancho, as we call them. Black magic at its core is just a form of weaponized psychology. The curse doesn't work if you don't know about it. And I think a lot of these organizations start to figure this out and started adopting some of these practices as a form of psychological warfare. We see the Templar Knight cartel guys basically made a saint out of their head, a leader. He was supposedly killed by government forces, and then he showed up alive, so that's his miracle. And he was finally killed for real. But there's still sites that venerate him as a saint. There's pictures of him, in crusader garb with a sword and stuff like that, and people watch his gravesite still as a saint. I'm pretty sure that when old Chapo Guzman dies in custody at some point in the future, if you don't let him go, because I know that the Mexican government is trying to negotiate his release. I'm sure that when he dies, he's going to be named a saint. There's already statues of him being sold as saint statues in Sinaloa.
Wow.
So and of course the whole proliferation of some of these Afro-Caribbean spiritual practices that have been used and corrupted by some of these organizations have led into videos of people being seen eating human hearts out there, or having the new initiates into a group partake in cannibalism as a sign of fidelity and capability and manlyhood. I think that's where the aspects of the occult kind of live in this conflict. I've talked to many people about the fact about the whole terrorist definition aspect of this, including some members of Congress. They want to figure out if these organizations meet what you would consider the definition of a terrorist organization. And I think the only thing that Americans have it to equate it to are Islamically motivated terrorists. And there's a lot of people arguing that these criminal forces in Mexico don't meet that definition because of religious or other aspects. I think they not only meet that definition, they add a few other elements to that definition that Americans should actually be taken into consideration. If anything, they're an evolution of that threat that the Islamic motivated terror organizations pose to the United States. I mean, this is an organization that outnumbers any single terrorist organization you probably ever faced as a country. Number one. They're transnational. They're in the U.S. already. So it's not only if you do declare them a terrorist organization, it's going to be a domestic terrorist organization as well, as well as a foreign terrorist organization. It's both. It's not like Al Qaeda that's based out of there somewhere. This is an organization that has ties and a foothold in places like Chicago, Los Angeles, Oklahoma, Texas, Arizona, around New York. So it's not going to be some foreign enemy, you know. It's an interesting aspect that occultism has been attempted to be utilized around this definition. It does have something to do with it, but we shouldn't make the mistake of demonizing a whole group of people in Mexico who are very desperate, who find comfort in the faith practices that they have been inherited. Just like I wouldn't go into a powwow and say anything about people dancing around and venerating aspects of their spirituality, I probably wouldn't have the balls to go to somebody who has a Santa Marta statue at their home and say anything about it, because it's a faith practices they have that aren't hurting anybody. But there are elements being utilized by certain organizations that come and stem from some of these occult practices. Yeah, they're very much being weaponized. That's kind of the best way to kind of put that.
Got it. Well, I was going to ask you about the terrorist organization designation and what you thought about that, and what is the long-term threat of cartels, whether organized or disorganized, both south of our border and then with those tentacles into the United States. And do those different cartels or organized crime syndicates have end states, or are they just trying to grab power and money and influence? Do they have an end state? And I was going to ask you about what you thought about designating them as terrorist organizations.
I mean, number one, I'm a kid from Tijuana. You know, I grew up in this and that war that hasn't been declared, basically this unnamed war. People call it drug war and stuff like that. In Mexico, it's not acknowledged as a war. So, in my opinion, it's come directly from not only being born there, being Mexican from birth, having friends of mine, having family there. So I have a vested interest in it. But I'm not political, and I haven't been politicized in any way, shape, or form. You know, if people want to know my politics, I like to smoke a joint. I'd like to carry guns. I'm okay with people being, I'm okay with people being gay, and I just like the government to leave me the fuck alone if they can. You know, those are my politics, right? Before I get started with this definition aspect. The United States has been fighting a war with China, unbeknownst to most of the public, for a while. It's apparent to people like myself who have actually witnessed the amount of fentanyl being pumped into Mexico through its Pacific side ports. Where the cartel that had access to those specific site ports grew during COVID, which is pretty funny and also alarming, the New Generation Cartel. while the Sinaloa cartel was smuggling fentanyl from the U.S. into Mexico to load their drugs to then send back up. So that should tell something to the American populace. Um, Chinese banking apps are being utilized to move money for cartels from the U.S. from Canada to Mexico. So their Chinese banking apparatus has been utilized and weaponized against the United States, U.S. interest in when it comes to this type of threat for a while now. Fentanyl, precursors that make meth, precursors that are used for a lot of other drugs, all come from China. There is no Chinese triad mafia doing this undercover without the Chinese state knowing about it. Number one, there is nothing coming out of China without China knowing about it. And they have been making a big effort to pump a shit ton of fentanyl into your country for years now. So that should be a factor where people take into consideration as far as declaring their proxy groups, which I think at least one of them has all the telltale signs of being a proxy group of a sort, you know. If somebody wanted to do the math and figure out how many of those Chinese Norincos are showing up in some places in Mexico and where they're showing up and in what hands, I think the math will match up to some of the stuff that I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think there's a big effort being done, and Mexico is basically it's our current modern version of Vietnam, where two foreign powers are basically fighting it out in a foreign country. Mexico is an example of that. The current top political candidate for the presidency just unveiled his counter cartel plan. You want to hear about it?
Yeah, and I want to know what you think of it.
Yeah, sure. It's amazing. It's like it's probably belongs in a book. So just take notes on this.
I can listen.
He unveiled a plan called Plan Angel, Angel Plan for Mexico. And think just as I describe it, you'll know what I mean. It's a AI run national database with facial recognition, biometric, and social credit aspects to it that are sourced from Mexico's allies across the world. And as he says this in his presentation, a big giant picture of Xi Jinping floats in one end, and a giant picture of Putin floats in another. And at the end of that, there's a picture of Joe Biden walking around lost somewhere. Now, in my mind, that sounds like the Mexican government is about to create a giant surveillance state that is run on Chinese software in Mexico. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm just paranoid. But again, this aspect of Mexico has has all the resources that the U.S. will need to push itself into the next 50 years. I know that China knows about this. 70% of all mineable lithium apparently is somewhere in the Sonora region. So I think it's a big aspect of why some of these criminal organizations are being driven in or pushed or flared up. I mean, it makes sense. If people want to, again, do the math on this, look at the amount of violence flaring up in places like Sonora. Sonora isn't really a cartel route-rich territory. Yeah. What are they fighting for as far as that territory? Well, they're fighting over control over eventual mining operations there or influence in the region. The Mormon massacre happened in this same area where a bunch of this mineable lithium was discovered. So people should kind of be doing the math on that, I guess. You find yourself in a country that is the currency has been stable for about 2 years, actually pretty strong. It's one of the most stable currencies on the planet right now. And the reason that is because it's about to turn into the next China, I think, and investors know about this. Mexico is the next China. Now, politically, is it the next China? I don't know, but it's going to become a manufacturing hub of the likes if it does things well. It's going to become the manufacturing hub of the next 50 years. And the U.S.'s foreign policy in Mexico has been horrible. It has. We've just discovered that at least three former Mexican presidents were on the payroll of the CIA, for example, with documents being declassified. And I suspect as we go along, most of the presidents in the 80s are also going to be revealed to be CIA bankrolled presidents in Mexico. So as far as this being a Mexico problem because of their corruption, and as far as the Mexican people just not being willing to do shit, the U.S. needs to get the Americans, and I include myself, because I pay taxes here now, and I'm part of this experiment. We all need to get our heads out of our asses and realize that this is a regional problem. It's no longer a Mexico or a U.S. problem. It's a regional problem, and we are very much responsible for a big part of it. Yes, they do have the responsibility, but we are also responsible in a big way. As far as the designation of them being terrorists, well, you have a foreign entity that is not friendly to U.S. interest and or U.S. Policy abroad that very much has their hand in Mexico, and that is not a theory. That is not a possible thing. That is very much true. To anybody who wants to look at it, that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. You have two giant cartels basically working and vying for power in Mexico. They are utilizing politics to basically solidify their positions in the country. It's why we have one of the largest amounts of political killings on the planet in Mexico, and also journalist assassinations on the planet in Mexico. Is one of the most dangerous places, if not the most dangerous place, to run for office or to be a reporter, for example. And it's because these cartels are politicizing and have been politicizing for years now. Same phenomenon that happened in Chicago. The Chicago mob didn't go away. They just went into politics. This is happening in Mexico. They are picking and choosing their own political candidates. We just saw the president of Mexico in Badiraguato, the hometown of El Chapo Guzman, in a press conference probably 3 years ago, say, we should buy locally, stop buying these Chinese drugs. What about the local farmers? This is something he's saying to a crowd of basically cartel families.
Yeah. So
the connection is there to anybody who wants to see it. Politics and cartels are very much entwined. Yeah. There's no teasing out. The cartels are a political force in Mexico. They're not a political party, but you can kind of see where politics are going to go if you see who sides with who in cartel politics. And that should be alarming as shit for Americans. So you start seeing this organization. Are they political? Yes. They are very much politicized. Mind you, not just in Mexico. And Americans should pay attention to this. They are politicized also in the United States. There's a lot of people that have gone through immigration processes that were paid for by cartel organizations. Yeah. And then later on, their families go into politics. So yes, this is an influence that is already happening in the United States. So don't think you're far from it. It's already there. Who are they? I don't know. That's just the U.S. law enforcement and intelligence services. I'm just a Mexican dude. I just see what I think is happening. Mm-hmm. So are they politicized? Yes, they are. Are they using terror to further their political aims? Well, yeah. I mean, when I was 21, I cut a dude off a bridge. It was very much done to terrorize the population. Mm. So yes, they do meet the definition, that definition in my mind. I mean, you want to talk about weapons of mass destruction. Mm-hmm. I mean, we outperformed the Ukrainian conflict for the first 72 hours of its inception, as far as bodies in Mexico. Wow. And if you are out there listening to this, look up how many Mexicans died in the drug war just this year. We out-killed Vietnam, I think, is the last I heard. So the Vietnam War, I mean. So it's basically a country in denial about the fact that it's in a civil war of a sort. Next to a country that wants to play it down and say it's not a civil war because that's bad for the economy,
Mm.
because Mexico is your second largest trade partner. And the whole political answer on the conservative side of politics in the United States is build the wall, keep the threat down there, uh, cut immigration. You know, well, none of these are being shit to some of these cartel organizations. Build the wall means that they charge more to cross you over the wall. That's what it means to cartel organizations. That wall is doing nothing but making business better for them, for example. Um, they're coming here. They have been here for years. The reason why gang violence went down in the early 2000s was because the Sinaloa cartel took control of distribution of narcotics across the country. That's why gang violence went down,
Mm-hmm.
not because of law enforcement.
Mm.
It's because a single player took control over the larger top part of the market. That's
Mm.
what happened. And when you see places flare up, it means that there's another player coming in. I think the doomsday scenario for me is seeing the new generation cartel basically take control over a city in the
Mm.
United States, and you'll see the violence that you see now in Mexico because there's going to be two top players vying it out, and that hasn't happened in a big way in the United States yet. But that will be the canary in the mine for people, and I think that by that time it's going to be too late to do anything about it.
The pod cover by 8 Sleep. As an author writing late into the night, and as a parent with 3 kids who get up early, I need every second of sleep I can get. That's where the pod cover by 8 Sleep comes in. Summer is reaching its apex, and there's nothing worse than tossing, turning, or sweating in the night because of summer heat. The pod cover by 8 Sleep will keep you cool all night, all the way down to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, so you wake up fully refreshed. The pod cover by 8 Sleep fits on any bed like a fitted sheet. The pod cover will improve your sleep by automatically adjusting the temperature on each side of the bed based on your and your partner's individual needs. It can cool down and warm up and adjusts based on the phases of your sleep and the environment that you're in. Invest in the rest you deserve with the 8 Sleep Pod. I sleep great on mine, especially now in the heat of the summer. Go to 8sleep.com/dangerclose and save $150 on the pod cover. Stay cool this summer with 8 Sleep. Now shipping within the USA, Canada, the UK, select countries in the EU, and Australia. Remember, that's 8sleep.com/dangerclose. EIGHT sleep.com/dangerclose. So things have changed over even that 12 years you were in, but certainly at the start and up to now. We're talking fentanyl now, we're talking China now, we're talking mining rights right now, we're talking about infiltration, not just purchase of politicians. What tactically, when you came in, what were you seeing as far as there's a demand, obviously, north of this border for drugs? Down in Mexico, what were you seeing as far as drugs made there when you started, 2000, 2001, 2002 timeframe, maybe even a little before that, and then things coming from Colombia all the way up? How does that relationship work between what's going down in South America, how they're getting up to Mexico through Central America, waterways, shipping, ports, and then into the United States versus demand now and the push for fentanyl?
Yeah.
Tactically, what are you seeing as far as movement goes? Has that evolved over time?
I mean, when I started, it was meth. Meth was the biggest thing, meth production, cocaine, marijuana, weed, which is hilarious to me now because every now and then I, light up. So it is what it is. But it's, you saw, that's what you would see, and mostly catered to an American audience, American market, just basically moving some of these things up. I think the first big change that I saw was towards the end of the whole prescription pain medication epidemic, opiate epidemic we saw in this country. It subsided, and then there was a bunch of people that were addicted to that shit who said, like, now what? Now what do we take? So there was this gap there.
Okay.
This perfect hole. That paired with the legalization of marijuana in other parts of the country, California, for example, that was sold to us as a whole, hey, we're going to legalize marijuana. It's just a plant. It's fun. It's great. And I do agree with it. I have nothing against marijuana use. I think it's benign as shit. You know, probably like anything, if you abuse it, it'll probably create some sort of psychosis, and it's not completely benign. But for pain relief, chilling out, for just getting a craving for cookies, it's fine, right? They legalize it, but they sell it as, oh, this is going to be a death blow for cartels because now they don't have this money, you know? But people like my friend John Norris, who have been hunting cartel guys, growing this illegally in the United States in public lands, is aware of this. A lot of those first weed companies had already cartel influences in them because those were the guys that were running growing operations in the area. So they just basically shifted to legal work and invested a shit ton of money into their pockets and kept up the illegal growth. So they didn't do anything realistically to cut cartel influence. Yeah. But what you saw in the South, in Mexico, what we saw was all these weed fields were now being shifted over to poppy.
Okay.
Because they said, well, weed isn't more a producer, so let's put poppy here. So you started seeing these poppy fields down there. The problem with these hillsides that there have been, I'm not too sure about it, but this is what I've heard from their growers and some of them that we caught. They would say that the ground was leached of nutrients, and there was not the potency of the heroin produced from these Mexican poppy plants was not the same as some of the stuff you would get from other parts of the world. At the start of my career, I found a giant ball of black tar heroin about that big. And if you ever seen any of that shit, you can smell it before you see it. After that, I never saw that color of heroin again. It was always light brown heroin, powdery. Somebody told them that if they infuse it with fentanyl, it would make it a hit with the consumer. Now, who that was and who came up with that idea? Well, this is all during the time when Chinese chemists are basically setting up laboratories within the legal, regulated pharmaceutical industry in Mexico. People can look up Sen G. Legon, Mexican Chinese industrialist who was caught with $100 million at his house.
Wow.
And to just figure out what he was into, pharmaceutical industry. So you started to see fentanyl laced heroin being flooding the U.S. market. That's the evolution that I first saw.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing them shift to pain medication, being clone pain medication, and also infusing everything with fentanyl. Cocaine markets are stable because these cartels are now established all the way down in Colombia. You'll go to Colombia, go places like Medellin, and you'll have cartel-specific distributors, and the Mexicans are all the way down there. You saw Mexicans try and set up growth operations in other parts of South America. They're not Colombia, trying to get them a bit more north, trying to figure that out. All the while, they've expanded their influence in places like North Africa, Southeast Asia, China, for example. Not that they're there operating, but they're there, gathering and meeting people probably, and all over Europe. So the influence of these criminal organizations has expanded in an insane way over the years. As far as what they're into, I mean, anything that is, I think the current trend is fentanyl laced everything. Pill presses are being found all over the country. Packaging. An Imodium package that has all the Imodium pills, but that's not Imodium. The pain medication being manufactured to look like, this is, one of those feel-good pills that they give you at the VA, but it's not. It looks like it, but then you'll end up dead the next day. That's a lot of the deaths attributed to fentanyl right now in the United States. Legit, many of those people didn't know what they were taking.
Wow. How about tactically movement of of drugs or items north over your time. We've seen submarines, semi-submersibles coming up the coast. What have you seen as far as tunnels we talked about earlier? Cars, every now and again on the news, or you'll post something and there'll be a video of something, whether it's weapons or drugs taped somewhere, and then there's very ingenious methods of hiding it. What's shifted over the years? It seems like a constant game of adaptation, just like any form of warfare. But what have you seen as far as the tactical side of movement of items like drugs north over your time?
I mean, tunnels have always been there. When I say always, since the 90s, they've been there. And I think there's more of them now, is one of the elements that I've seen change. They're very good at them. And most of the tunnels that are found have been used for a while. And I know the U.S. is trying to figure those out. It's just a hard one. Different type of clay types in parts of Baja just makes it different. I was aware of a few companies coming out of Israel that were trying to apply some of the same tactics they use out there in Baja, but it's a no-go because of the soil type is what I heard, and people can call bullshit on me, but that's what I heard. I remember seeing bridges being built so people could drive over the border wall with when the border wall was just the fencing aspect of it at the start. Small dirigible, small one-engine planes being utilized. Catapults.
A catapult. I think you posted a catapult or something a little while ago.
A trebuchet catapult. And I know, I'm a nerd for history, and because I'm a legit, I consider myself a war fighter, so I should know about these things. When I saw that fucking trebuchet, I remember watching it on KPBS explaining how that fucking thing worked, and I was like, holy fuck, somebody paid attention to this shit. That thing would launch drug loads across the fucking border wall.
That's incredible.
Impressively.
Yeah.
RC cars, RC cars being utilized to move drugs across the border. I saw that. I was part of the unit that found the first meth-loaded quad drone that crashed on the border, and I took pictures of it. I think I have them somewhere. So we started seeing them trying to figure things out constantly, obviously, right? When I was on Rogan, I talked about the fact that we found evidence when I was active of a fully submersible submarine. And by this time, none had been discovered in a big way, I think. And I was told that it was full of shit. And then, lo and behold, they found the first. They've been finding the first fully submersible ones. And when I mean fully submersible, I mean they're about that much underwater, but they're still submerging. So I think what you're seeing now is, number one, a lot of these groups have been utilizing dark web technology and shit to move around product in small amounts into the country, utilizing shipping venues and product and commerce going across the border, and that has been going across the border for years. They've been utilizing some of the energy related industry in Mexico to move things from across the border. And this is something that's already been kind of like, they've already found some of these out, but they're doing it to such an extent that if you'll find one, 5 of them will get through. So they're throwing the product at the wall, basically. That's what they're doing. Bangas, fast boats on the San Diego side are not an uncommon thing. It's uncommon for a lot of them to be caught. That's the uncommon thing. But a lot of them are making it through and just dropping their product off in a myriad of places just in San Diego or a bit further north. You're seeing, again, submersibles being utilized in the Gulf specifically, but I'm aware that some of them are actually traversing also the Pacific side as well. At least that's what I've heard from some of the people that are still in the job that kind of like share some information with me. Cars, why make an effort right now to hire a drug mule to cross the border with a few keys of cocaine when you can take advantage of the fact that Tijuana right now is a giant hub for a bunch of economic migrants from the U.S. Again, 90% of all housing in Tijuana is being bought up by Americans.
Oh, wow.
So it's a giant hub for Americans.
Okay.
So all I have to do is go to a house that has California plates in it, in one of these neighborhoods that are rent, and I'll track it for a day, put an air tag in there or something of that nature.
Mm.
I'll track it for a couple of weeks, and now I have a car that basically goes back and forth between the United States with somebody completely unsuspecting with a very blonde set of hair and
Mm.
blue eyes. And I will use them as an inadvertent drug mule. And this happens regularly in places like Tijuana, and it has been happening regularly in places like Tijuana. So it's Christmas. It's Christmas, and it's funny that it's the part of the drug. It's part of the border wall that is. Tijuana is basically one of the most secure parts of the border section
Yeah.
there is, and it's where they're putting most of the drugs through. You know, that
Wow.
wall, the wall, the politics around that wall.
Yeah.
I'm a very big uh, critic of it. I mean,
Okay.
not that there shouldn't be a wall and immigration and stuff like that. Sure, check everybody, verify everybody, but don't let anybody in politics sell you on the fact that that border wall is keeping narcotics out of the country. It's just not the case.
Those inadvertent drug mules, when you tag that car, and then are people just going in at night, putting in something in the trunk or whatever, knowing that it's going to go across the next day, and then once it parks wherever it parks in the U.S., bam, there go, take that, and off they
Yeah,
go.
yeah. The people in that field, cartel people, it's Amazon Prime. That's a nickname for this fucking tactic. You know.
Wow.
This is basically a free delivery service for themselves.
Yeah.
They're taking full advantage of the fact that that border is porous,
Mm.
not because of corruption, but because the U.S. is now not what it used to be, and there's a shit ton of economic migrants living in Mexico. And they are bringing with them drug markets,
Yeah.
very rich drug markets. That's why you see a lot of shootouts in some of these normally peaceful places like Tulum, for example,
Mm.
because of all the economic migrant Americans now living down there
Yeah.
and bringing their drug market, and now people are like fighting for it because
Wow.
it's viable.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of the counter narcotic stuff that the U.S. is going to try, it has been trying to do and stuff like that, is going to be defeated by the fact that Americans themselves are making that border wall irrelevant. Uh, it's just, again, the whole
Yeah.
aspect and the big push that I'm always
Yeah.
trying to give out there is that this is no longer a Mexico-American problem. This is a regional problem, and we need to get our heads out of our asses and call it what it is.
Interesting.
Because Americans are living in Mexico, a
Yeah.
lot of them. I think
Yeah.
more than anywhere else. I think. Um, so we need to figure out what this means.
Mm-hmm.
If Americans are living down here,
Mm-hmm.
Mexicans are up there doing illegal immigration and are working in most of the backbone of the service industry in the United States.
Mm.
If we're being honest about it, even during COVID, produce was still stocked on the aisles, which means illegal immigration was essential working immigration, essential workers, basically. And the U.S. also needs to do some soul searching when it comes to that aspect of it.
Yeah.
And the big one is, I think the one that's on the mind of most people right now because of movies and politics and people weaponizing it and kind of like politicizing it, the human trafficking aspect of it.
Just gonna ask you about that.
Yeah. So first off, human trafficking wasn't invented recently. Jim Caviezel in that movie that he didn't invent it or didn't come up with it, didn't realize that there was a problem. This has been happening for decades, decades. People being moved, people being utilized, slavery, that all that shit has been happening on the border decades. And to me, as a new member of this country, uh, I got here after the election of Trump. And then I saw the whole cancel the police aspect of it. Went through a few riots myself, went through the Atlanta riots, went through the Portland riots as an observer because I wanted to learn.
Mm.
Um, you saw a whole country being basically screaming about its history with slavery and how it's in the past. And I see Asians, African Americans, and Americans going to Chipotle and buying extra guac for their the burrito at Chipotle,
Mm-hmm.
and that pays for cartels because people are taxing those avocado growers on the border, or they'll go to a hotel and you know the workers there are paying off indentured servitude uh, payments to organizations somewhere because they couldn't pay their way across. So they're basically slaves. Gavin Newsom had his winery open during COVID, and who do you think works out those fields? Uh, we're all complicit. That's the aspect of it. I think a big part of my advocacy aspect
Yeah.
of it and awareness is that we're all complicit. It's not we can point fingers as far as human trafficking all we want. The Epsteins of the world are out there. There's some shady shit happening with children on the border because they're being bussed in
That's what I wanted
and
to ask you about.
unaccompanied. Me and my friend Sean Ryan actually went and toured one of these migrant caravan camps on the border, and the stories that we would hear of just kids just disappearing, or women being separated because they had the right measurements
Mm,
and being treated differently and just disappearing as soon as they cross the border, like stories like that.
yeah.
And an American altruist coming down to support these caravans for the good of humanity with a bunch of things that they would donate to them, and then they would basically grab those donations and sell them on the open market in Tijuana and buy whatever they would buy with them. This it's insane to see the realities of some of these aspects on the border. Because again, I'm a border child. I grew up on the border, and I still go down there regularly to kind of see what the situation is. Mind you, for me, I've trained the Border Patrol. I have friends who work for the Border Patrol,
Hmm.
and I've also went down there and talked to migrants and trained some of the migrant aid workers not to die in the desert and to get out of the harm's way. So I've looked at this issue from both sides. Um, human trafficking is one of the heads of this giant organized crime element in Mexico that we can't no longer tease out from politics in Mexico. So it's a massive entity. In a lot of parts of that border, they make more money off bodies over the border wall than drugs. And that's just the plain truth.
And is that the
Um,
draw then for cartels? Is that money, which in turn gives them more power and more influence? Because when you talked earlier about migrants coming over and working fields and that sort of human trafficking, then there's organs and there's children and there's sex slavery. That demand from the United States, drug demand in the United States. But I think people in their heads can see, okay, there's a demand. It's a business. Okay, there's a demand here. If you're over here, you're going to provide this product. The organs from young children and the sex trafficking of young children, that part, I think, for a lot of people is different than the drug side. And what did you see over your time in as far as the movement of children, whether it's for organs, maybe in Mexico, and people from the United States or Europe coming in for those organs for transplants and that sort of a thing,
yeah.
and then
So,
the demand for children as far as sex slavery in the
yeah.
United States and the movement of those children north?
So again, this whole aspect of responsibility and where the problem is. So children were being placed in and around luxury hotels and spaces where foreigners would come to visit. Like some of the children that are trafficked, that's where they end up. Some of the children that are stolen from their parents in Mexico, because there's a lot of that happening as well. Will end up in these services that are catered to European, American, Western men and some women apparently that will come and that's what they do. So when I talk about responsibility again, this whole aspect of Mexican problem, and I keep kind of like hammering that in, it's a regional problem. But a big aspect of it when I started it was Americans basically utilizing Mexico's permissive nature and the fact that 90% of all murders don't get solved in Mexico. I imagine that it's going to be the same case for child abuse and human trafficking situations. They have been taking full advantage of some of these the permissive spaces that they're in, and it's no secret that some of the stuff still goes on in places like southern Mexico and some of the luxury areas where Americans are now kind of gathering. Um, the aspect of organ harvesting and in that regard, it's hard to tell because that happens at such a high level and under so much protection. I mean, to harvest an organ means you have to have access to a private hospital service of some sort and somebody with a lot of training to extract it correctly and take it and move it somewhere. So that means money. That
Hmm.
means that means stable, organized connections in industry and in the medical field. So it is cartel, but it should tell us something about the nature of some of these organized crime groups. It is cartel, possible, probable, but it's mostly business problem, and it means that these cartels have diversified and have gone into the industry of hospital building and private hospital building in a lot of parts of Mexico. That's legit. There's a whole industry of medical tourist industry that it has grown around Americans to coming to receive their medical treatments in Mexico, and some of them come to receive other things. Blood transfusions, young blood therapy. It was something that was talked about for a minute, and then
Hmm.
it went away. In Mexico, um, there's and again, I don't know about these things directly, but I've heard uh, theories around the killings in places like Juarez. And these are theories, and I don't know if they're true or not. All I have to go on is some of my guys that went with Lisa Ola to work out there during some of
Hmm.
the times that these killings were happening, of women being found completely desiccated without any blood in their system. Now, why would you extract all the blood out of somebody and dump them in a field in a situation that looks like it was a rape and murder? Unless, I don't know,
Hmm.
for moral puncture, that like you would do it to a body to extract all the blood.
Yeah.
And this is, again, these are rumors and things that
Yeah.
are said, and it's Mexico, and maybe true or not, I don't
Yeah.
know, but it makes your skin crawl.
Yeah.
Um, Missing posters of kids in places that are big urban centers across Mexico are everywhere. And if people want to go to Mexico City, just have a look around, you'll see them constantly. Kids going missing. There is a giant hunger for it in the United States and in other Western countries. That's where the problem comes from as far as the demand. And yes, send out your operators and your Jim Caviezel's to go and do counter human trafficking operations in these third world countries and have their hero moment and stuff like that. But where are the raids in the U.S.
Yeah.
Some of these sex tourists that made their way back? Where's the connection being made between some of these medical industries that are happening outside of the United States and some of the people that are trafficked and go missing? It is a threat. It is something that is out there. It is happening, and then it happens more in the U.S. than more people care to think about or know. I mean, Arizona is the abduction capital of the United States, for example.
Hmm.
People should think about why that is. What's happening in Arizona that makes it such a thing, such a place.
What is that in Arizona? What
Uh,
is Arizona?
Excuse me.
Why Arizona? Not another.
It's a giant drug corridor, and there's a big possibility that politics have already been infiltrated in such a way as I've described in the area.
Did you run across human trafficking part of these organized crime syndicates when you were in?
Yeah, yeah.
Kids?
Containers of people, kids, women, South Argentinian and Brazilian women in some of the places, nightclubs in Tijuana, basically. Being held there captive because they weren't given access to their passport, or they brought their kids and they were promised a living situation where they could have their kids with them, but then they're separated from their kids and now they're in it. Um, uh,
Man.
Kids related videos and child pornography studios run by Americans in Mexico being found. Um, with clear signs of analog attempts to negate digital traces on the products that they were creating. And I mean, that was when I was active, and I know for a fact it's still going on. Um, it's there is there is something happening in Mexico right now where legit there was a semblance I remember, at least for a time when I was active, of some sort of control, or somebody in charge, or somebody being at the helm, or somebody giving a shit about finding all these kids being trafficked across the country in the open in
Hmm.
front of the fucking media, being utilized as fucking political props. Somebody used to give a shit about that, not anymore.
What is that?
Nobody cares.
What is that? And what is that in the United States? That demand, obviously, just like there's a demand for drugs, there's a demand for these kids up here. What in that particular, like we talked a lot about drugs, but when we talk about kids moving up here, and what do you think that's the psychology of that is in Mexico providing that product? Like for drugs, you can see it. There's a demand,
Yeah.
boom, bam, oh, whatever. Kids, especially when you talk about religion and even if it's the occult and it's been weaponized and all that sort of thing, but just the humanity of regardless, take cartels, that whatever, the humanity of moving children to a location where you know they are going to be used in the way they're going to be used. It's not a substance. It's not a drug. It is a person. It is a young child. What is the psychology of that allows you to move them the same way that you move, let's say, cocaine or marijuana or fentanyl?
I will ask all of the Americans that have donated money to some of these caravan organizations down all the way in South America. What is the psychology of that? They're trying to help because something has been normalized to such an extent that these brainwashed idiots are sending money over to basically an organized attempted human trafficking because
Mm,
that's a lot of these, that's what they are.
yeah.
So, example, why do you think that first migrant caravan didn't go to Texas like this recent one did?
Huh.
Why do you think it went all the way to Tijuana?
I don't know.
The answer is simple. They're all 18th Street. Most of them, when I say most of them, probably 70% of it, if not more of them, were 18th Street gang members.
Huh. Okay.
Covered head to toe with tattoos. That's why they're all wearing the hoodies, even when it was summer in Tijuana.
Hmm.
And that's why when the Tijuana citizenship saw these people coming into and demanding to be led into the United States, demanding the United States give them money to go back to where
Hmm.
they're from, and demanding of the local populace to basically give them everything they needed, and
Hmm.
complaining about the fact that they were given beans. That's why locals in Tijuana fucking rose up, basically.
Mm.
And that's where the Make Tijuana Great Again hats fucking
I saw some of that.
appeared,
Yeah.
right? And I may or may not have made a few of those, but that was a sentiment because people were aware that these people were being utilized as a political
Yeah.
weapon. That Americans were coming down to paint these guys as victims, as somebody that needed to be led into the United States. And locals were like, "What the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
These are a bunch of criminals."
Yeah.
The women and the children were being put on the outside of the camp so for visuals, while all the men were in the middle.
Mm.
They had to be moved from a soccer field where they were being held in next to a school because of all the drug solicitation and all the needles being found in the primary school that was right next to it. And if you don't believe me, go ask the locals. We actually filmed the podcast right next to that field, and you can go down there and ask them, right?
Yeah.
Uh, what happened? What's the psychology? I think a lot of horrible behavior has been normalized over the years on certain political and a certain side of the political spectrum, that makes people scream for support to these poor children that are being moved across the country to make a better life for themselves in the United States, when in all fact, they're being trafficked across the country by criminal elements into the United States to be received by other criminal elements that are already waiting for them. And in a lot of ways, the government is being complicit because they grab them and they set them up and they move them around and they notify whoever needs to be notified. And then eventually, somewhere along the line, whoever really owns them shows up. That happens a lot. Um, this is a problem in a situation that is not getting any better. This is the most violent year to be a Mexican, and it's getting worse. if we can do the same math as far as Americans, and if so we can feel it as well. How many people have died of fentanyl overdoses and or exposure, not even knowing what they were taking? I was in Cleveland and heard the story about these three teenagers doing cocaine for the first time, and guess what was in the cocaine? Those three kids got buried a few days later, and they were just fucking idiot kids.
Yeah.
I remember when you would find a joint on the ground and you'd be like, oh shit, this is the greatest day ever. Now there's no fucking way you're gonna smoke that thing. Well, you don't know what's in it, you know? It is a dangerous and very dangerous time to be young.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the most dangerous time in history.
Yeah.
And in one of the most dangerous places in the world, I guess, to be a kid, which is as a society, like I like to consider myself an American, and I'm a permanent resident of this country. I'm paying taxes. I want full citizenship. I'm trying to get there. It's a matter of time more than anything. Uh, there to all the people shitting on this country as far as it being a bad place, a racist place, whatever you want to say. Uh, there are less enemies to that freedom in this country than anywhere else in the world. That's why everybody's coming here. Um, and the world itself is becoming less and less influenced by American, that American specific mindset that good guys versus bad guys. We want to make everything better. We want to better things out there for people. The U.S. is retracting itself, and globalism is on its way out. And this isolationism that we started encountering, I think, after Trump. And I get the nationalist aspect of it, and I get his need to make America great again. I don't take me wrong. I understand what he's pushing and what people respond as far as his politics. But there's a giant time bomb on our southern border, and several small ones in the United States already. And I think that's what's coming ahead if people don't wake up to this fact. It's not about politics, left or right. There's a reason why this whole talk about Mexicans being a terrorist organization is bipartisan in nature. I mean, people are waking up to this fact.
Yeah.
Whatever conflict is coming is probably going to happen on that southern border.
So we've talked a lot about drugs coming north, children coming north, but there's some things going south. Where were you when you heard about, was it the Fast and Furious gun tracking debacle? And what did you see during your time as far as weapons moving south? And then that operation in particular, where guns ended up south, and then how that was then. Anyway, that if people haven't looked that up, Fast and the Furious, Katie Pavlich has a great book about it called The Fast and the Furious. But what do you think about that situation?
I mean, it's an example of me wondering exactly what the government that I was working for was doing at that time. It's come to light that that the Mexican president at that time, Felipe Calderon, had some sort of knowledge of this operation beforehand. And if he did, he has a lot of questions to answer.
Can you describe it for people from your perspective?
I guess the ATF decided it was a good idea to let straw purchases of firearms happening on the border in places like Arizona and Texas. To let these small arms purchasers, basically individuals buying things for themselves that later traffic them down to Mexico and sell them to the cartels. It's gun runners, if people want to call them. They decided to very specifically let some of them cross that border with an absurd amount of new firearms being bought up in many gun stores across the border in the United States. An operation, I think, that predates Obama. I think it was started under the Bush administration, but it basically continued on, and it fed a Sinaloa cartel with weapons that was fighting for control against the Zeta cartel at a very specific time in Mexican history. Very suspicious. Very suspicious that a single cartel was armed with some of these weapons. They eventually spread out, and different cartels were found with some of these. But the main influx of some of these weapons ended up in the Sinaloa cartel's hands. Now, how did I find out about this situation? Well, we saw the murder of a federal agent uh, with one of these guns in Mexico. Um, uh, that exploded into this whole controversy. But before that, and mind you, I raised some money for I think I've raised a lot of money for the Ryan Terry Foundation myself, and I thought it was a very symbolic gesture to do so. So I raised, I don't remember exactly how much, a pretty substantial amount, a bit over $3,000 for the Ryan Terry Foundation. And I do it just so people are aware that I'm not here to take any sides.
Mm.
But nobody has raised any money for the friends of mine have been assassinated by some of these guns, right? And I did that to prove a point. Um, the first time I saw an FN 57 pistol, it was left abandoned on the side of the road after it was used in the assassination of one of my friends and his wife. He was coming out of his house. Two kids showed up with FN 57 pistols, new out of the box, and loaded those pistols into my friend, his wife, and their daughter, who was in the back seat, who lost her arm. She survived, but she doesn't have an arm. And we started like figuring, well, space guns, you know,
Mm-hmm.
mata policías, cop killers, P90s, Barrett 50 cals in the box with the manuals still in it. Civilian grade AR-15 platforms that you could convert into full auto with a machine shop. A lot of this had Magpul dynamic shit on there, so there's no doubt where all of it came from. Except we were seeing them, it's like, oh, these guys have the latest fucking foregrip on there, you know. So we're seeing a lot of that. We started seeing a lot of that, like a lot of it, like a flood of them, basically. And we couldn't figure out where they were coming from, you know. We should just started getting an augmentation on their side, you know. We thought, well, since we're utilizing armored vehicles now to move our command structure, 50 cals were being introduced into the fight, and some of them were being utilized against some of those armored vehicles. So there was just an obvious uptick in violence with some of those guns coming into Mexico, and they killed and murdered a lot of people that will never get a foundation started for them, including some of my friends. What did it mean and what was it about? I have no idea. It's very suspicious to Mexican eyes as far as what American interests were doing, arming a single cartel. We don't know. I think Eric Holder has a lot to answer for, so I don't know how he's walking around free. But that's just me. If I ever have the ability to see him in person, I want to talk to him. There's some stuff happening on the border. U.S. foreign policy has not been the best, and when it comes to Mexico, in recent history, it has created a problem that is now murdering thousands of Americans through the fentanyl coming over the border. It's murdering thousands of Mexicans with the firearms being trafficked into Mexico and being utilized in crimes down there as well by criminal organizations that are being fostered and propped up by well-intentioned Americans, sending money off to support these caravans and these migrants making their way through when they're actually really supporting a giant criminal enterprise that basically makes money off blood and bodies and children and women. And poison. I think what's the next war is probably going to be south of the border. I think it's not me wanting that. I don't want war in Mexico. I would rather everybody just chill the fuck out, and we would all get together and just figure things out as far as how to be better as a whole neighborhood of a country. I think we're going to need each other more than we think. As far as global politics in the coming future, where as globalism is basically dying out. But before that, we have to extract a giant tumorous cancer, and I think that tumorous cancer is on both sides of that border.
And you mentioned executive protection earlier and high risk executive protection, learning from some of the team guys that were in Iraq doing that security detail, of which I was one. And it was an interesting time to be doing that sort of a job in Baghdad. And it was it was interesting. And you got to learn some of that and then adapt it to where you were. These days, do you, when it comes to your personal security and your personal protection, is it something that you don't seem paranoid, but when you go out, I'm sure you have situational awareness that is naturally attuned to changes in your environment. But what sort of the lessons did you take from doing that job down there to what you're doing now? And I know you're teaching around the country. You have these different courses. I can't wait to take one. I've been meaning to do some for years, the counter custody stuff. But you're teaching these incredibly unique courses. But then you also still have to worry about yourself. And do you take, I'm sure you take precautions, but how much is at the forefront, how much bandwidth is that taking up for you these days, your personal security?
Well, I mean, first off, a lot of the people that work with me that don't work with me anymore went to work for one side.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't worry about a whole side of that issue myself because I never fuck with them in any personal way. I never took anything that wasn't mine. I never worked with any of the side. I wasn't in anybody's pocket. So in that regard, I'm like, my mind is clear. I came out of that job poor. People should know this. That's why I'm doing this. If I had gone out of that job with I found a bag somewhere, I wouldn't be talking to you right now online. I would be somewhere enjoying a margarita on the beach or hitting in the hills or something like that. It does make me lose some sleep every now and then, but it's just something that I have to do. I'm basically homeless. I travel across the country and I've been sleeping out of Airbnbs and hotels and been basically doing classes, training, and figuring things out around the business and being an advocate about stuff for the past. I'm about to go into a vacation, and this is my first vacation in about 3 years.
Nice.
So,
well, I'm glad. Time to get back training in case I get a field this fall, as I've been doing a lot more writing than I've been doing working out lately, which is why I was so fired up for this care package from First Form. I tried the protein meat sticks right away and absolutely love them. Protein meat sticks from First Form are similar to protein bars as far as benefits. First Form protein meat sticks are a delicious and very convenient way to get more protein throughout the day. Protein is essential to any health or fitness goal. No other meat stick like it on the market, packed with a full 20 grams of protein in each stick and only 200 calories or less total. It comes in 5 incredible flavors: original smokehouse, seasoned barbecue, Cajun style, jalapeno heat, and breakfast sausage. Great for a snack at the office, in the car, on a hike, or anywhere you're on the go. Check them out. I've also been drinking the Opti Greens 50 from First Form. OptiGreens 50 is a precisely formulated greens superfood powder meant for overall immune system support and digestive health. 50 hand-chosen ingredients in precise and effective amounts with non-GMO and non-synthetic superfoods that provide a well-rounded blend of vitamins plus antioxidant-packed ingredients for overall immune health support and defense against toxins in the air and in the foods we eat to keep us as healthy as possible all year long. Go to firstform.com/Jack Carr. That's the number one STPHORM.com/Jack Carr to receive free shipping on any orders over $75. Once again, that's firstform.com/Jack Carr. But what was your plan then when you stepped away from that?
There's no plan.
You had no plan. Because it sounds very similar to people leaving the military. A lot of people leave without a plan, or they have a plan that as soon as they step out, they realize, oh, there were a couple of fissures in this plan right here.
There was a conversation that I had with a wonderful man, who's a brother of mine, a friend of mine, who's an NSW guy, Dan Stanchfield. He's a reservist right now. I told him that it was getting close to my time to just leave, I think. And he said, well, if ever you need anything, I got your back. And when that time came and I had my 3-year-old in my arms and the cash that I owned in my pocket, and that they opened up their house to me. They basically became my host family as I went through this 2-year process of immigrating to the United States. Um, when I was there in this avocado orchard of a place, beautiful place. It's a funny. I remember telling them the story of me having 3 cell phones, a satcom radio, and armored vehicle assigned to me, and all the other shit with me. I had about 85 people under my command at one point.
Wow.
To being in the middle of an avocado orchard with a track phone, and that's all I had. Going from one to the other. Luckily, I had developed a group of friends and contacts, and through my reputation, had people that would open their door for me, like Dan Sanchiel, my friend and brother, and his wife Kelly, and companies like Triple Lot Design out of San Francisco
Oh,
hired
no
me to
kidding.
basically start doing classes through them. Hey, show us what you learned,
I did not
basically.
know that. I'm a huge fan of them. I have a pack of theirs right there, right over there, a
Uh,
pack from them.
but my first classes in the United States were done through that company, Triple Lot Design, and
No
their dog
kidding.
patch training site. Yeah, in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Craig Douglas used to teach out of there. A few other people used to teach out of there. So that was my start. And basically, when I started doing that, I was like, who's gonna want to learn all this stuff?
Uh-huh.
Um, the first social media account that I had and that had a cult following was named Ed's Manifesto,
Yeah.
and that actually was born by a team guy basically making fun of the fact that I always carried around a notebook.
Hmm.
So I was somewhere in North Island with a little notebook writing down something really quickly as a corpsman was explaining how you can pack a wound with dirt.
Hmm.
And a team guy behind me said, "What are you writing in your little manifesto, Ed?" And that's is where
No
Ed's
kidding.
manifesto, Ed's manifesto came out of. Um, every time I would see something weird or something that I think was unique, I would send some of these guys the pictures of some
Hmm.
of the stuff that I would see, including some of those squad drones that we find out there. And then I said, well, they seem to be very interested in this type of stuff. Why don't I start a blog? So I started a blog on Tumblr, faceless,
Hmm.
anonymous blog. And I started posting about some of the stuff that I would see in Mexico, basically.
Hmm.
But slowly but surely, when I moved to the US, a lot of those influences and a lot of the people that I had already won over with my work and just my reputation were there.
Hmm.
And legit, I came here with nothing but my 3-year-old in my arms and my little cash in my pocket. And I somehow got the attention of Joe Rogan, and he was a fan of the page for a while
Yeah.
and invited me on. I didn't know what that was at all. Like legit, I didn't know the scope of that.
Uh-huh.
I got there. Uh, a team guy was doing security for him who I
Yep.
knew, nicknamed Circus. I don't know if you know who that is, but if Circus is out there, hi Circus, it's me. And I got there, I was like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? I'm about to get interviewed by Joe. I'm not even gonna do you the service of searching you. You probably have something. I don't have shit on me, dude. I'm just here for a conversation. Had that conversation, and as I was driving back to my little spot, my phone exploded, and I realized that something
Hmm.
supernatural just happened.
Hmm.
Uh, and then it was asked back again, so I went on twice.
Nice.
And that basically opened up a bunch of opportunities for me to have a platform.
Hmm.
A lot of people will use a platform like that to, I don't know. Uh, I was, I wasn't there to sell anything at that point,
Hmm.
but my experience. But then I realized it could be utilized as a platform to talk about some of the issues of the places that I'm from, and I
Hmm.
realized that I'm the only voice of that war in the United States right now. If you think about it.
Hmm.
There's nobody like me in the United States at this moment. No veteran of that war is currently a public figure and has the ability or access to talk to people about what he went through.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, I realized the responsibility that is. So I've been doing what I can with it to become not only an advocate for people like myself who go through experiences like that, and some of the trauma aspects of it, recovery. Like
Yeah.
I did a very public fight with alcoholism, and I actually said, you know what, I'm pretty ashamed about my alcoholism. Let me get off it and show people it's possible, basically.
Mm.
So I did that basically through my Instagram account live. People would see my progress. I've started learning about trauma, PTSD, and how to deal with that. I started learning about new language around some of these issues, and basically being utilized by people that had gone through trauma of that nature, and they come to some of the training courses that I provide and basically do their tandem amount to exposure therapy. People that have been in situations of home invasions, rapes, people that were caught up in a bad situation where they were held or tied up. And they come to me and I show them all the ways they can get out of it. Not only that, but I'll show you how to use those handcuffs to basically strangle somebody if you wanted to. Basically arming people with knowledge, and people that have gone through it and don't want to go through it again, or will not find some redemption and capability.
Yeah.
And also advocacy, every now and then I get people. I've had a bunch of my cadre went over to the Ukraine and trained some of the forces out there.
Wow.
Some of the Hong Kong protesters before the whole shit kicked off went through some of the urban movement and counter custody training that we do.
Wow.
And I don't know how they did out there, but probably not that good. But people were doing stuff with some of the skill sets and knowledge base that I've gathered in a very bad place.
Yeah.
So I think right now in my time of life and right now in my life, it's about learning how to make something positive out of a negative, I guess.
Yeah. It's important to do that in life in general, no matter what the background, I think. What happened to that original Instagram account? Did something happen where it went away a couple of years ago? What happened with that?
At 400,000, Instagram took it down because I posted videos of the lockdown in China.
Wow.
And it's gone. Like I
Gone.
had people that wanted to assist us in getting it back and paying. Nuked.
No
But
way.
I'm doing something right. We're at 240,000 again in a year.
Wow. Well, people go find it now. It's Ed Manifesto's podcast. Is that what it is?
It's at Manifesto Radio Podcast.
Manifesto Radio Podcast.
And people can still find me at through edsmanifesto.com.
Yep.
And that's how you find us. They've been trying hard to shut us up for a bit, and people going on the Instagram account will see it's a ride along with me.
Yeah.
Humorous.
Yeah. Sometimes
stuff.
I'm like, what? And
yeah.
And other times I'm like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
All that humorous stuff comes from my therapy circle.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody knows anything about trauma, it makes you really funny. That's an amazing self-defense mechanism that we developed through trauma, humor.
Uh-huh.
So a big part of the humor aspect of it, and also there's also lessons in a lot of that humor.
Yeah.
I'm not a badass. I did some shit. I survived some stuff, but I'm not Jocko Willink. I'm not going to wake up at 4 a.m. and throw kettlebells around. I'm a damaged dude in his 40s. I'm about to turn 41. I didn't have a good go around. I wasn't celebrated when I got back home. I didn't have any parades. I didn't have any awards or medals or anything like that. I was spit on. I was cast aside. I was thrown away in a lot of ways. I think there's a need for a representation of that in our whole community of people. I mean, like, it's okay to not become a superhuman physical specimen after you're broken. And it's okay to laugh about some things. And it's okay to be vulnerable about some shit and talk about horrible situations that you went through. And it's fine. And it doesn't change you or make you weaker or make you weirder. It actually, for me, I remember going through my therapy, I figured my biggest fear was people finding out how broken I was. And somebody gave me the best piece of advice. You can't pickpocket a naked man. So I just fucking went, I just talked about it, I guess, publicly.
Wow.
And I think between our advocacy and news related stuff we do with our sister page Demoler, reporting on
What is
cartel
that?
issues in Mexico. Demoler.
Okay.
Demoler is a U.S. Is a American orientated cartel news group that we sponsor and work with in Mexico.
How do you spell it for people looking for it?
Demoler, it's Demor,
Okay.
Demoler, Orler, Demoler. Um, if I spelled it wrong, I'm sorry. But you can
People can
find it
Google
also
it.
through,
People can Google it,
yeah,
and they can link.
Demoler.
Okay.
Yeah, Demoler. It's an English specific news source out of Mexico. It's run by an amazing woman, Jeanette, who does in like reporting from Mexico. She's great. Everything I get as far as information, I send over to her, and she's been doing a great job reporting. So
Yeah.
that's one side of the stuff we do, and the other side of the training side, we do training for the federal government, local government agencies. I get consulted for whenever they find a weird statue somewhere or when some weird cartel stuff happens. I'm not usually get called.
Yeah.
And we have a clothing brand and a knife brand that we run as well. We have
Is
a
that all on the
charity.
website?
That's all of it's on that website.
You can find the knives on
It's
there?
yeah,
Oh man.
yeah. So it turned from me being a weirdo coming to this country, trying to figure things out, to this weird multi-headed organization now that has a bunch of people that work around it and a bunch of people that are being supported by it because a big part of the work we do is charity. So if people think I'm getting rich off this, I'm making people around, I'm enriching the lives around me is what I'd like to think about more.
Man.
But this is not about me. I'm Catholic, so if people want to know where it comes from, it's probably that guilt.
There it is, the Catholic guilt. Yep. And you're doing unarmed combat and blade work as well, part of those courses.
So people misunderstand when we talk about when I talk about some of those classes. I'm not a knife guy. I'm not doing any sort of knife karate. I do a class called weaponology. Weaponology is basically I'll teach you how most criminals will arm themselves anywhere and how they smuggle those weapons or how they will go component based and get the components past the point of inspection or how they will just create something past the point of
Mhm.
inspection. That's what I show people, very much in an adversarial thinking mindset.
Mhm.
Musashi used to say, know the enemy, know his sword.
Mhm.
I'm showing you the sword of the enemy, basically. This is how they do it. This is how they hold people. This is how some of these things happen. And I'll show you how to go through the whole process. And not only that, but I'll give you the simulated experience of actually stabbing through something. We have pigs at these classes, pig carcasses at these classes, and we go through a process of familiarization and actual knowing what these things do to flesh. If you carry a knife every day, if you never stabbed a pig or something of that nature, it's
Mhm.
probably a good idea to go through. It's like owning a gun and never taking it to a range.
Mhm.
But a big aspect of the stuff that I show in that class is mindset software. You don't have to buy a $500 knife to be dangerous and capable. A kitchen knife you can pick up and know how to use is enough. If you have the right mindset and the right skill set, you can become very hard to manage and dangerous anywhere if you pick up a pointed object.
Yeah.
Why would you need to know that? I don't know, because the US is becoming a non-permissive environment in some places, where they're not allowing you to have the responsibility to take care of yourself and your family. And that's exactly what it is. It isn't about rights. People should step off that horse. It isn't about your right, it's about a responsibility. People are now not allowing us to take responsibility for our own safety and our own families. That's what it
Mhm.
is. People should look at it that way as well.
Control.
That weaponology class is about that. And again, I've done this for the military, people traveling overseas, how they can arm themselves.
Mhm.
People, you can't take your can of mace. Well, you don't need a can of mace. Get some brake cleaner, and I'll show you how to turn that into the best counter carjacking device you will ever carry with you. You know, uh, Bic lighter, duct tape to a WD-40 can. It'll make you a pocket torch. It'll make you warm around the fire, I guess, if you wanted to. How to make a point on an object. Points are usually what people make in non-permissive environments. I'll show you 100 ways of doing that. You don't have to have what you need with you. You can create it anywhere. And I think that is a very powerful thing to give people.
Yeah.
That's one thing I do through weaponology. That's kind of the class,
Yeah.
metal detectors, density scanners, all these things are there to provide you with the sense of security. But once you really get to the history of these things and how they work and how criminals have already figured out how to get out of them, you
Mhm.
realize that it's not as cut and dry as that.
Man.
And again, we come from a post 9/11 environment. People should have learned that lesson long ago, but I guess I still get people at classes not learning it for the first time.
Yeah. How much of that stuff did you see on the job versus how much you saw and then adapted to like, oh, they did it like this, but you know what you could do is this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it I saw on the job, but
Yeah.
these people had a small amount of time to kind of figure things out, and I've
Mm,
been at this a long time.
mm,
Not only that, but I have very cool friends. I have friends who are in the field of manufacturing firearms with 3D printers. I have friends who are in the field of software and hacking communities. I have friends who are in the primitive survival community that show me how to make a knife out of glass, or that show me that a deer antler can get into every single airport in the United States, and it's enough to pierce a torso, and it's not on the no-fly list of objects. So I am basically figuring out and learning how to expand some of this knowledge base and how I show it to people. One thing I do never do is I don't never show anything that I haven't seen out there.
mm.
So if I see something that's very unique, I'm like, that's a cool one. I'll save it for myself or maybe cool friends that might hire me, from the
Mm,
government.
mm.
But everything else is open source. So if anybody's alarmed by anything I post on my Instagram account or anything I show in any way, shape, or form, they need to get out more.
Yeah.
uh, because some of these things are completely in the open and open source. All I'm doing is basically formatting them in a 2-day class for people.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not there to train you to become that. I'm here to let you know that that is there,
Yeah.
to learn how it works so you can identify it. So you can take the red pill and realize that safe areas, safe zones, gun-free zones are basically victim-rich zones. And if you're not taking the responsibility for your own safety and that of your family, you're who are you? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
counter custody is basically the same thing, but related specifically to getting out of restraints. So we
Hmm.
go over handcuffs, zip ties, duct tape, rope, chemical restraints like fentanyl, high potency marijuana, cannabinoids, other medications that are being used out there for this type of stuff. I'm not a medical professional, but I'll go into the exposition of how these are used, what they look like, how they
Hmm.
the symptoms are like, and what treatment would look like if you had access to it.
Hmm.
But then I'll go into the whole process of how some of these abductions will work. There's no cookie cutter form for these, but people trying to gain control over somebody else to humanize them, hold them down, strip their stuff, tie them down, all these things usually have some commonalities, and I'm pretty good at formatting all that into a class for people. So that's what I've been doing for the federal, local, state, and civilian classes that I've been doing across the country for about 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And people should take a quick look at how easy it is to get into a hotel room, and maybe just think about some things that you might want to do to secure yourself in some of these places. I saw
Yeah,
first that one you
yeah,
posted the other day. I think it was a couple
yeah,
yesterday or the day before. But
yeah. We just did a class in Riverside with my friend Matt Fiddler from Zierpick. He's actually done SEER type training for the government and stuff like
mm,
that, but he's a covert entry specialist. He'll basically show you how to open up every single commercial lock on the market right now. And I am a breaking and entry specialist because I used to do that shit for the government in Mexico.
wow.
But Matt was for the first exposition I got into lock picking.
Mm,
And lockpicking has a space and a part. People look at some of the stuff we show in classes like, oh, you're teaching the criminals. Criminals won't lockpick. Criminals will take two kettlebells, duct tape them together, and make a battering ram and use that to knock down your front door. Criminals will not lockpick. Maybe some of them will, I don't know, but mostly won't. That class is legit designed to like be a wake-up call to
yeah.
people. We'll teach you how to open up every single commercially available lock out there. The lesson there is one, buyer beware, and also not to depend on this lock to keep anybody out. Locks are there to keep honest people out, not the rest. this rash of under the door tool videos that are going on out there of people using them. One of the first things that we show you when you use an under the door tool is first to ID the doors that this is a viable or feasible attack to have on that door. So one thing I do is I take off the cell phone case on my phone and I'll slide it under the door so I can actually see the door with the camera, right? Trick. I dare people to see if they can find that trick being displayed out there in video by anybody else before me, but it's a trick. It's a trick that I learned from criminals. That's who I learned it from. Once you learn how to do that, use that under the door tool for that handle, you realize if you put a baseball hat on the handle of that fucking door, sucks for the guy trying to use that tool. Or if you put a door wedge on that door, specifically a saber wedge, it's a door alarm wedge that is out there. So if you move slightly, it'll cause an alarm. I always travel with one, and they were always on my hotel door. So you start realizing through the act of performing this criminal method, you realize how to counteract it. And if you weren't exposed to that, I have a hard time figuring out how you would, unless somebody like me says, well, just put a door wedge on your door and that's enough for security. But why? Well, because there's this way of opening the door, there's this way of opening the door, there's that way of there's dynamic entry, there's breaking and entry, there's social engineering, there's going to the hotel lobby and pretending I'm your husband and you lost your key and having AI voice emulator answer the phone for you, because it's something that's happened already in Mexico. And I just showcased that at the class this weekend and everybody was like, yeah, so I can call your wife and I can have somebody that isn't your wife pick up the phone.
Wow.
So a lot of these classes are that, software awareness, know your enemy, know his sword. To keep quoting Masashi, it's a very influential. The Book of Five Rings was a very influential book when I was a kid. It was in my backpack at 13 when I basically ran away from home, and I think I've still on the run in a way.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Well, what's ahead then for you? What's when you look at the next 5 years, everything you've accomplished thus far, everything you've been through, this foundation that you've built from past experience and now in this country, what are you looking at over the next 5 years?
Advocacy. People like me, you'll say, hey, chill out, fucking lay down, take a break. People talk about, first off, I'm an immigrant to this country. I'm new here and I need to prove myself. That's my mindset. Most immigrants, not all of them, but most have that mindset. A lot of people talk about the freedoms that this country provides. I am grateful for the responsibilities it has allowed me to take on. Legit. If anything, that I kiss the floor in the U.S. when I leave it and I come back to it. I'm thankful for the responsibilities that it has given me. I came to this country without much of anything, and now I have a few employees which I take care of as best I can. It has allowed me to create a charity organization that is currently feeding some very needy fighters who are making their way up in their fighting careers and their dreams. They're trying to accomplish something. So a big part of some of the things we support are through them as well. We paid for a few eye operations and needs for a bunch of the orphans that were left behind by some of the conflicts that I was a part of. And as I move forward, I'm providing a platform for people that have gone through trauma before to kind of voice and talk about it. I have a podcast where I have people on like Micah Fink, who runs Heroes for Horses, and is doing an amazing service to bring people back from war, even though they're back. People that I used to fight. My first guest on my podcast was Conejo, a rapper. My unit basically arrested him on murder charges and deported him to the United States. And now we're friends.
Wow.
And our daughters played together while we were recording the podcast.
No kidding.
I guess a big part of my next step and project is a book, which I'm almost finished with. It's not a memoir of any kind. It's legit a book, a collection of poems that I
Huh.
poems or written spoken word poems related to some of the experiences that I had and some of the lessons that they provided from 13 to 40,
No
and I'm
kidding.
about to turn 41. So
Wow.
that's why I'm concluding it in this coming month.
Okay, I was going to ask you about a book, and but I was thinking more of this experience
I couldn't
that you
find a
had.
conclusion. I couldn't find a conclusion for it, and I think after 2 years of therapy, not being on the sauce anymore, being so busy making other people's lives better instead of my own, I think I'm there. I think I'm right there now.
Oh
So
man,
I'm probably ready to for the next chapter.
wow, man. Well, thank you for so much for spending so much time with me. It's such an honor. I've been following you for a while and for a long time,
I've
and want to get
I've
in
been
your courses. I mean, I got to get in one of those or multiple in the future here.
I saw your first book come
Oh
out, and
man.
I shared it on my profile. I remember you sent me a cool message of support, like, "Hey, thank you for sharing
Oh
it."
man.
Um, and then randomly turning on the TV somewhere on my travels and seeing, your the stuff that was in my head now, like people moving around on the screen and things that I recognize, like that tomahawk as part of my own personal history. Um, Now being out there in a
Mhm.
way, I remember being able to point at that tomahawk to my daughter and say, "I used to carry one of those." No
Wow.
way. And then I took out the picture of me standing in front of a Black Hawk helicopter, wearing some jungle marine warfare boots that I bought in Pendleton, no, in Coronado
Wow.
at their store. Jeans, Black Hawk plate carrier that was a piece of shit, and a curly maple handle Syak Winkler tomahawk
Nice.
hanging down my left side and my MP5.
Man.
It was an amazing time of my life. And it's amazing to see elements of it now being portrayed as forms of fiction. It's wild. It's a wild time to be alive. So thank you for doing that.
Oh man, hey, thank you so much, and I'm so glad that you're on this path and that you're here, and that things are going the way that they're going for you. And I hope we can link up in person soon. But once again, that Instagram, what is it again? The new one?
It's Manifesto Radio,
Okay, Manifesto
Manifesto Radio
Radio.
on Instagram, or you can go to www.edsmanifesto.com, and it has a link to all of our social media, has a link to our Patreon account, which is where we do a lot of our digital training,
Nice.
and to all of the stuff that we work on and we love, and to the community that we so graciously are a part of.
Oh
So if
man.
people want to check us out, you can go there.
Yeah, everybody please do. And of course, that'll all be in the show notes as well. But man, thank you again. And I don't know when we can meet up, but I hope we can do it soon. And I'll be watching for that book to come out, the poems, and I'll be picking that up first day it's available and talking about it on whatever platforms I have. So yeah, man, best wishes, and dang, thank you so much for spending so much time. I don't watch my podcasts, but I'm going to watch this one back with a pen and paper, and I'm going to be taking some notes off of this one. And it'll be the first time that I've done that in one of my podcasts. So man, thank you so much.
Thank you. And also realize that do that, and just people like me aren't represented anywhere in media.
Mm.
So like legit, I've never seen myself anywhere in any fictionalized form,
Mm.
except the Sicario dude, which
Yeah, what'd you think of those? When you see a movie like that, or you see Narcos or something like that, do you try to enjoy them for what they are, or are you picking things
uh,
apart, or are you?
I'm picking things apart. Benicio del Toro had an MP5 and was wearing a blue shirt.
Mm,
Somebody was watching my
interesting.
Instagram account, but I don't know. Who knows? Uh,
Interesting.
it's probably, I don't know. But I'm not a lawyer from Colombia, so people need to get off that bandwagon, I guess. Uh, it's wild to see some of that stuff. But
Yeah.
legit, I have to this day, I haven't seen anybody represented that I would recognize as somebody coming from the field that I came from.
Mm.
It's cool to do. You should do something about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll be taking some notes here. Yeah.
You're the guy. You're the guy.
Oh man,
You're the
thank
guy.
you. Yeah, appreciate everything. And yeah, please reach out if you ever need anything. And man, I'm so excited for what's ahead. So I'm sure I'll be seeing you in person one of these days soon.
We'll see you shout out there. I'm about to do a class somewhere in October with Clint Emerson. He's going to
Oh,
be
nice.
there. Again, we've been talking. Like I was on his podcast a few times, and he's approaching everything from a different different standpoint than I am. So it's going to be wild. And again, I love being a part of this community. Like just learning from all these. All of us came from a post 9/11
Yeah.
environment, probably, and that's wild that we are all on this side of it now, living this weird afterlife of a thing, and like how we're all fighting each other, which is cool.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna pay attention, and if that date works for me, whenever that class is coming up, I'm gonna see what I can do to
Awesome.
sneak into that
See,
one.
Craig Douglas, Clint Emerson, and a few other people are going to be. It's basically this whole symposium thing.
Oh, nice.
Be
Okay.
out there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be paying attention. So if I can make it, I'll be there. But if I can't, then we're gonna link up somewhere else.
We'll figure it out. I'm always on the road, so all the travel miles in the world are in my pocket. So let me know. I'll show up.
Oh man, so awesome, so awesome. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, man. Be safe.
Take care. You too. Black Rifle Coffee Company. You can help Black Rifle Coffee raise $1 million to benefit veterans through the boot campaign. All you need to do is grab a can of ready-to-drink coffee online or from your local grocery or convenience store. The Boot Campaign is one of the most renowned veteran-focused nonprofits in the country, working tirelessly to provide life-changing aid and benefits to service members and their families. Join forces with Black Rifle in the Boot Campaign from May through the end of the year, where every can of ready-to-drink coffee you buy will contribute to making this massive donation possible. Black Rifle ready-to-drink coffee is available in several great-tasting flavors on the Black Rifle Coffee website, at your local convenience or grocery store, and no matter where you are, you can fuel your caffeine fix while supporting veterans. Every time you crack open a can of ready-to-drink, you'll be making a huge difference in the lives of veterans and their families. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to serving the veteran community, and with your help, we can all continue to make a difference. Let's raise a can together to keep fueling Americans for a good cause. Check out blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose. Drink up. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. First off, thank you to Badass Workbench for this amazing workbench. And they don't just do tables, workbenches, desks like this. They do all sorts of incredible custom work. This one has 4 swing out, very solid chairs, and what a great group out there. So be sure, check them out, badass-workbench.com. Also, Cole Kramer right here. Thank you for the shirt, my friend. Be sure and follow Cole and his adventures, not just on Kodiak, but really all around the world on Instagram. And Cole, hope we can get out together in the backcountry soon. And what's over there? Fort Knox safe. You can kind of catch the corner of it there. And I've had that for about a year now. Awesome safe right down here in the Salt Lake City area. And you might have noticed one in the Amazon Prime Video series adaptation of The Terminal List in James Reese's garage. So absolutely love that thing. Fort Knox, awesome. All right, what is this? This is a Smith & Wesson 686 revolver and stainless right there. And Tim over at Dead Air Silencers heard me and Jeff Gonzalez on the podcast talking about this and talking about how we used to use these in the SEAL teams when I first got there. So I always wanted one. Revolvers, awesome. If you don't have one, you probably need one. And which means you also need some training. So going up to Thunder Ranch, I went up to Thunder Ranch in Oregon, trained with Clint Smith on revolvers, shot the Smith & Wesson 45 ACP Thunder Ranch edition up there, which I also have over in the safe. Super cool. But this one right here, 686 stainless Smith & Wesson, and can't wait to get some leather for this thing and put it through the paces. So Tim at Dead Air Silencers, thank you for pointing me in the right direction. And wanted one of these for over 20 years now. And now I have it. So Tim, thank you. And of course that led to this right here. So this is the 6 Hour P226. And this is what I carried in the SEAL teams on every single deployment. This thing was in a holster on my hip. Even when I had to put my M4 down to go into a meeting or something like that, I always had my P226. So this is, just fits my hand really well. Love this thing. So SIG, thank you so much for that. And the Frederick Pen Company. So thank you guys out there. The Frederick Pen Company sent me 2 pens, and yeah, frederickpenco.com. And they put a lot of thought into the type of wood that went into this custom pen, and I love pens, but this one has to do with one of the novels. So thank you guys, really appreciate it. And they made me this custom one right here. Look at that. And put cross tomahawks on there. Not sure if you can see it right there or not, but they engraved the cross tomahawks in there for me. So thank you guys so much. That's frederickpenco.com. Check them out. All right, Anthem Jerky up in Montana. So I was in the airport not too long ago, and somebody recognized me, and they ended up being somebody from Anthem right here. So got to talking, and this is a veteran-owned company up in Montana, and they sent me some jerky. This stuff is awesome. Check them out. Follow them on Instagram. And yeah, this is the bourbon flavor right here. This is some spicy right here. Straight fire. What are you guys trying to do to me? Yep, I'll probably like this one the best. Awesome. Yeah, bourbon. And then they have some dog treats right here. So our dog Scout is very thankful. So once again, Anthem, A-N-T-H-E-N, veteran-owned company up here, just up the road in Montana. So thank you guys. And look at this, Caleb. Man, he was here yesterday from Stick Sniper Archery and brought me this. So this is Dorado American Single Malt Whiskey. And this is from the American Southwest, the Sonoran Desert. And man, I cannot wait to give this a try here. I think I'm going to do it tonight. So awesome. Caleb Brewer, amazing guy. You should follow Caleb and Stick Sniper Archery as well. But thank you for the gift, my friend. Sincerely appreciate it. I'm going to enjoy it in this glass right here. Look at that. So leather wrapped cross tomahawks, officialjackcarr.com. Shop in the upper right-hand corner for the merch is where you can find these. And every time the whiskey glasses drop, they go out there pretty quick. But there's all sorts of stuff like this coaster and, like this coaster. Yeah, look at that thing. Sweet. And lastly today, some blades. So these 2 blades are from Dauntless Manufacturing, and so they sent these out. There we go. Look at that one right there. So thank you guys. They know how much I am a fan of blades right here. So once again, that's dauntlessmanufacturing.com. Here's another one, another different sheath right there. Yeah, look at that. Bam. So thank you guys. Sincerely appreciate these. And yeah, Zach, appreciate you sending this out. dauntlessmanufacturing.com. Awesome. All right. That is it for the day today. Take care out there. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. To find out more about Ed Calderon, go to his website, which is edsmanifesto.com. You can click to his courses from there, to his social media from there, but his Instagram is Manifesto Radio Podcast. So be sure and give him a follow there. You can follow me at Jack Carr USA on the social channels, officialjackcarr.com. That is the website. Click on shop in the upper right-hand corner for the merch. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. And until the next time, take care out there, stay safe, be strong, keep fighting.